Warrior Lore. Chapter 2508. However, it was clear that the only sword cultivators were the blue-robed swordsman and Ruasi. As for the cultivators, there were two from the Imperial Thunder sect and one from the Huanhua sect. Ruasi was definitely not a match for Mingyu and Qinsheng. Ruasi was very clear about the blue-robed swordsman's calmness. When she flew to the left and whispered a few words, the blue-robed swordsman didn't even frown, as if he didn't hear her. However, when Ruasi retreated, the blue-robed swordsman asked in a deep voice, "I'm Ge of the Copperbell sect. Who are you from the Imperial Thunder sect?" "I." Nameless. Xiaohua saw that this swordsman was actually so calm and still wanted to ask for his name. He hesitated slightly before answering. "Nameless. Good name." Ge didn't care whether Xiaohua concealed his name or not. He nodded. This Ge can fight with an expert from the Imperial Thunder sect. This trip to the Seven Extremes Mountains was not in vain. "Please," Xiaohua's pupil shrank, and he raised his hand. "All right, since Brother Nameless won't fight, then this Ge won't be polite." Ge cupped his fists, and his body emitted a faint earthen yellow brilliance. His figure gradually accelerated as he flew towards Xiaohua. "Oh?" Xiaohua's magic power surged as he waved his hand. When he was about to take out a demonic tool, he saw the brilliance around Jiye's body and couldn't help but be stunned. This brilliance seems very familiar. Why is it similar to the cloud-suppressing seal? Copperbell sect? Xiaohua suddenly thought of Jiye's self-introduction, and his eyes flashed with a trace of understanding. This young master knows. This Jiye is a tool cultivator. Ha ha ha, I understand. No wonder he didn't make the first move. It turns out, he doesn't have a magic weapon. He himself is a magic weapon. The corner of Xiaohua's mouth twitched. He finally understood why the two of them confronted each other for so long. However, he immediately felt a chill in his heart. He hadn't encountered many weapon cultivators in this battle, and the highest realm he had encountered was only at the drawing sword realm. However, this Ji actually had a cultivation of the 3rd grade of the illusory sword realm, and he had refined a magic treasure into his body. Xiaohua really lacked this kind of experience in direct combat with magic treasures. Looking at Jiye's body, the earthen yellow brilliance became increasingly brilliant, and a kind of valiant force involuntarily diffused throughout the entire battlefield. As for Xiaohua, who bore the brunt of this, he felt that the true essence in his body had already been obstructed, making it difficult for him to circulate it smoothly. Roar! Xiaohua raised his head and roared. The sound of thunder also came from his body. Rumble! Tiny threads of thunder surged out from his body. At the same time, his body suddenly rushed out. It was as if he was stepping on rolling thunder. Imperial Thunder Shock. Imperial Lightning Shock. It was Imperial Thunder Shock? It's not Imperial Lightning Travel. Qinsheng was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Previously, he was already shocked by Xiaohua's lightning escape technique. But when he heard the loud sound of Xiaohua's Imperial Lightning Travel technique, he cried out involuntarily, "I have finally seen Imperial Lightning Travel in my lifetime." Fellow Taoist Mingyu was rather astonished to see Qinsheng lose his composure. She said in a low voice, "This is Imperial Thunder Shock, very difficult to cultivate?" "It's more than difficult," Qinsheng blurted out, but after he finished speaking, he regretted it and said in a low voice, "This is a secret of my Imperial Thunder sect. Forgive me for not being able to say it out loud." Nonsense. Master Qianlazi had only cultivated to the edge of the 2nd layer of the lightning eclipse. He hadn't even stepped into Imperial Thunder Shock. This Golden Core senior brother was already at the 3rd stage of the lightning eclipse. Do you think Qinsheng could casually reveal this? Wang, Ji had already turned into a shooting star. The earthen yellow brilliance was exceptionally dazzling. The strength of the confinement force surrounding him was fluctuating. As he flew, all of the magic tools and magic treasures within 100 zhang of him, including flying swords, were vibrating. They were all not under the control of cultivators and swordsmen's divine senses. They slightly trembled in midair and emitted frightening cries. At this moment, Mingyu also understood. As an equipment cultivator, It was normal for Ji Yi to be able to use his divine sense to isolate her connection with her magic treasure Mingyu. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure was also blurry. He was like a bolt of lightning. Even the might of wind and thunder surrounding his body was not the least bit inferior to Ji Ye's. Senior brother Nameless, what are you doing? Seeing Xiaohua also clenching his fists and rushing over, Qinsheng was dumbstruck. A golden core cultivator was actually competing in physical strength with an equipment cultivator. Wasn't this just stupid? Both of them were using all of their strength. The distance of a few li was closed in an instant. Even Ji Yi was bewildered. He didn't know why Xiaohua still hadn't taken out his magic treasure at this time. His other hidden hand could only fall through in vain. But at this moment, Ji Yi suddenly felt a needle-like feeling in his Niwen palace. Oh? Ji Yi laughed involuntarily. He clearly understood that this was definitely a divine ability that Xiaohua used with his divine sense. Unfortunately, he was currently an equipment cultivator. He simply didn't fear this kind of secret technique. Indeed, Xiaohua really couldn't think of any method. He flew to the center and used the soul-piercing technique. Who would have thought that Ji Ye's Niwen palace was like a lump of stubborn stone? His divine sense was instead pierced. Fight! Ji Ye's scarlet-yellow eyes didn't even blink. He clenched his fists and smashed them towards the charging Xiaohua's body. Senior martial brother, Qinsheng couldn't help but clench his fists. He clearly understood that if this fist smashed onto the body, not to mention a mid or late gold core cultivator, even a nascent soul cultivator absolutely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Since Qinsheng was so anxious, there was no need to mention Fairy Hongxia's worry. She really didn't understand why Xiaohua didn't take out his magic treasure. Could it be that he gave me his magic treasure and didn't have it himself? This kind of lover. Good. Today this old man wants to see if your equipment cultivator's body is stronger, or if my Imperial Thunder Sect's body cultivator is stronger. Xiaohua's arrogant voice rose from afar. It really made everyone's eyes pop out. Xiaohua actually also clenched his fist and smashed it towards Ji Ye's fist. Rumble. It was practically a world-shaking tremor. Waves of air soared into the sky from between the two people. Within several hundred zhang, all the magic tools, magic treasures, and flying swords lost control. They were sent flying by Ji Ye's uncontrollable confinement power and the countless tiny lightning bolts that rose from Xiaohua's body. The swordsmen and cultivators who were fighting turned pale with fright. This kind of power had already surpassed a fight between golden core cultivators. They couldn't help but connect to their magic treasures and immediately flew up again, leaving the several hundred zhang space for the two people who made them feel inconceivable. The cultivators and swordsmen who were fighting might not have seen clearly, but the cultivators and swordsmen who were secretly watching the fight were dumbstruck. They saw the two people colliding with each other with their bare hands. That Ji Ye's face was expressionless as he stood majestically. Even his blue robe didn't move in the slightest. But what about Xiaohua? As if he was struck by a heavy blow, he was thrown into the air. However, Xiaohua, who was accompanied by this flash of lightning, flew up 5 zhang and immediately laughed wildly. A string of afterimages flashed and rushed towards Ji Yi again. No matter if it was a cultivator or a swordsman, they were all very clear that Ji Yi was a high-level equipment cultivator of the illusory sword. It was a magic treasure. How could a cultivator compare? Not only did Xiaohua receive Ji Ye's all-out attack, he even counterattacked vigorously after being repelled. This cultivator. Good heavens, could he still be called a cultivator? The following battle situation was even more puzzling to the crowd. They saw Xiaohua brandish his fist towards Ji Yi, and a rare trace of astonishment flashed through Ji Ye's eyes. He also brandished his fist to block. The two people actually fought in the air with their fists and feet. Although Ji Ye's fists and feet contained a strong confining power, and Xiaohua's fists and feet flashed with lightning, and when their fists and feet hit a hard rock, the rock would certainly be turned into powder. However, each of their moves was clear, completely similar to the martial arts of the secular world. Among the several tens of thousands of cultivators and swordsmen, there were definitely people who had seen fists and feet. When they saw that the two seniors were actually martial artists, they became even more puzzled. After all, martial arts were the work of the secular world's people. After fighting for no less than half a cup of tea's time, the two people were actually evenly matched. Xiao Hua's Big Dipper God Fist and ethereal steps were not inferior to Ji Ye's fists and feet in the slightest. Especially Xiao Hua's physical body, even if it was inferior to Ji Ye's, the difference was limited. Moreover, within the space of several tens of zhang around the two people, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was incomparably chaotic. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was stirred up by the two people's every move was actually greater than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth when two magic treasures were fighting. Xiao Hua, a golden core disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, had really overturned the limits of cultivators today. Looking at Ji Yi again, his originally almost emotionless red and yellow eyes now had a bit of fanaticism. It seemed that he hadn't been this happy for a very, very long time, and hadn't fought with such a wild style. "Eat my fist," Ji shouted loudly. He clenched his fist, and a power that could shatter a huge rock with a single punch, accompanied by an extremely valiant confining power, rushed towards Xiao Hua. "Ha ha ha, how could this old man be afraid of you?" Xiao Hua clasped his hands together, and lightning lingered on his fists. The lightning tore apart the confining power and rushed towards Ji Ye's fist. With a loud bang, the two fists collided. The air condensed, and then a wave of air gushed out. As the wave of air rolled, fine traces that were hard to see with the naked eye actually flashed in the air. However, these fine traces were too small, and as soon as they appeared, they immediately healed. This impact was still a bit too strong, and Xiao Hua couldn't be as steady as Ji Yi. His body twisted and turned, cleverly dispersing the force, and even using this force to counterattack Ji Yi. This was also what Ji Yi couldn't understand after much thought. Nameless, Ji Yi blinked his eyes and said, "This old man didn't expect that a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect like you would also be proficient in the martial arts." Likewise, Xiao Hua casually replied. However, the martial arts of today's martial arts are already nothing in this old man's hands. -8. Chapter 2509. As he spoke, the earthen yellow light around Ji Ye's body suddenly shone brightly. A powerful suction force appeared from his body. Strong tornadoes were created, and all the heaven and earth spiritual energy within several hundred meters of him was drawn towards him. Xiao Hua stood steadily within the tornadoes. Purple lightning coiled around his body. He looked at Ji Ye's transformation without fear. The light became brighter, piercing Xiao Hua's eyes to the point of squinting. However, he could still clearly see that the light was gradually expanding. Runes appeared on Ji Ye's forehead, face, and bare arms. Those runes flowed within the light, as if there were countless tadpoles swimming within Ji Ye's skin. Bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. Xiao Hua was familiar with the sound of vibrations coming from Ji Ye's body. Along with the vibrations, Ji Ye's head, shoulders, and arms gradually disappeared. They gradually turned into a solid earthen yellow color. When the surging heaven and earth spiritual energy gradually calmed down, a 3-meter-long ancient bronze seal appeared in the air. Above the seal, there were many jade talismans hanging from it, and a lifelike dragon head was resting on top of the seal. The dragon's body coiled around the seal, and the runes that had been flowing on Ji Ye's skin appeared with the sound of the dragon's body. An enormous power of a magic treasure flowed out from the runes, and under the dragon's body, there was actually a wave of runes, overturning sea seal. Even though Xiao Hua had never seen the overturning sea seal before, he could not help but shout at this moment. Wasn't this the overturning sea seal that He Fong Yuan spoke of? It turned out that this overturning sea seal was indeed from Changbai sect, but it did not end up in the hands of ordinary Dao cultivators. It ended up in Huan country, and even more so in the hands of a weapon cultivator. No wonder Ji Yi could suppress the innate true water. Xiao Hua had a flash of understanding. It was as if someone was controlling the ocean overturning seal. The ocean overturning seal slowly rose up, and a sealing force that was several times stronger than before suddenly appeared. The space within 1,000 feet was filled with this sealing force, and even the air couldn't flow. "Oh my," This is a true magic treasure. Xiao Hua sighed inwardly, his hands swiping in the air. Amidst the dense dark clouds in the sky, a huge bolt of lightning struck down along with Xiao Hua's lightning-attracting art. It struck the ocean-overturning seal, the seal of the ocean-overturning seal. Terrifying Phoenix, previously, Guyu had never seen Xiao Hua use the lightning-attracting technique, so she was unable to distinguish it. At this time, seeing this hand seal, her complexion changed greatly. It's just that Xiao Hua's previous cultivation and previous appearance were very different from the current one. Although Guyu's heart was greatly shocked, she still couldn't be sure. Actually, there was no lack of sword cultivators who had such thoughts, because the name of the terrifying phoenix was just too famous, just like Qin Jian's reputation among cultivators. Of course, all sword cultivators knew that the phoenix dharma body, lightning attraction technique, and foundation establishment cultivation were the marks of the terrifying phoenix. At this time, Xiao Hua only had the lightning attraction technique, so they could only think of Xiao Hua as the terrifying phoenix's teacher. Roar! The ocean-overturning seal emitted an earthen yellow brilliance that was almost 10 feet long. It rushed straight into the sky, blocking in front of the heavenly lightning. Even if the heavenly lightning completely scattered this brilliance, when it landed on the ocean-overturning seal, the damage was minimal. Ha ha ha, sure enough, it's delightful. Xiao Hua laughed heartily. His hands rubbed together again, and streaks of lightning poured down like a waterfall. See, not to mention Ming Yu and Ruo Si, even Qinsheng was also dumbstruck. Although he came from the Imperial Thunder Sect's Canlei Palace, when had he ever seen such heavenly lightning? When had he ever seen heavenly lightning falling like rain? That surging heavenly lightning, the powerful force, the flash that seemed to be able to scatter all living things, it really made people tremble with fear. The three of them had no doubt that if they were under the heavenly lightning, even if they could use magic treasures and flying swords to block it for a moment, they would still be smashed into pieces by the heavenly lightning. However, this was only their feeling. The ocean-overturning seal was different. They saw the ocean-overturning seal radiate brilliance in all directions. The dragon head that was entrenched on the seal slightly raised, and streaks of ripple-like illusory images rushed into the sky one after another, blocking the heavenly lightning 10 feet away. The most inconceivable thing was that the ocean-overturning seal suddenly flew up, and an illusory image flew out, bringing all the ripple-like illusory images with it. The real body instantly rushed in front of Xiao Hua and crashed into him. Seeing that the true essence in his body was imprisoned by the ocean-overturning seal, and it was very difficult for it to flow, Xiao Hua's arms shook, and with a wave of his hand, he took out 2 huge devil hammers. These devil hammers were obviously smaller than the 2 devil hammers he got from the Thunder Sect, but now, it was already good to have something useful. Cha-cha-cha, lightning flashed around Xiao Hua's body. At the same time, he did his best to resist the imprisonment power, and at the same time, the 2 hammers fiercely smashed out. Boom! With a loud sound, Xiao Hua's body flipped over like a bullet. The power of the 2 hammers could not compare to the ocean-overturning seal, and Xiao Hua was sent flying back. The ocean-overturning seal did not stop, and once again flew out, following Xiao Hua. It was much more agile than Xiao Hua's cloud-suppressing seal. Boom! Seeing the ocean-overturning seal coming over, Xiao Hua stabilized his body, and at the same time, waved the 2 hammers again, and continuously hit the ocean-overturning seal. Alas, rather than saying that he hit the ocean-overturning seal, it was better to say that he was sent flying by the imprisonment power of the ocean-overturning seal. Although the devil hammers were powerful, Xiao Hua was not a devil realm devil after all. He could only borrow the weight of the devil tool, and could not use the devil tool. Every time he hit the ocean-overturning seal, 50 to 60% of the power was blocked by the brilliance of the ocean-overturning seal. The power that could truly damage the ocean-overturning seal was really very little. Nameless, are you looking down on this old man? Suddenly, a muffled and somewhat cold voice came from Xiao Hua's ears. It was actually Ji Ye's sound transmission. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Looking at the ocean-overturning seal that had stopped attacking and was slightly rotating in midair, he also sent a sound transmission. This old man has already used his full strength. How can you say that this old man is looking down on you? You are a cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect. If this old man was in his human form, it would be fine if you used your fists and legs barehanded. But why is it that when this old man transformed into a tool and fought with you, you are still barehanded? If you don't look down on this old man, then what is it? Isn't this old man's devil hammers a devil tool? Xiaohua laughed. Could it be that your Imperial Thunder sect is so poor that you don't even have a single magic treasure? Ji Ye's voice became increasingly cold. Old man, you are a bit strange. Xiaohua pointed with his hand and said, if this old man took out a magic treasure, would you still be alive? You don't take the opportunity to kill this old man and actually want this old man to take out a magic treasure? This Ji would rather fight to the death with you than be tolerated by you. Ji Yi was somewhat angry. Hearing Ji Ye's words, Xiaohua's heart moved. He thought to himself, this tool cultivator has a rather straightforward temperament. If there wasn't a Dao cultivator battle, I should be able to make friends with him. If you still don't take out your magic treasure, this Ji will ignore you. Ji sneered. There are tens of thousands of Dao sect disciples here, but there isn't anyone who can resist this Ji, right? All right, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and sent a sound transmission. This old man does have some methods, but it isn't convenient for me to use them in front of everyone. If you want to experience them, we will leave this place. All right, Ji agreed without hesitation. The ocean-overturning seal suddenly flew high into the sky, flying into the distance. You all will continue as before. Ignore I. Xiaohua coldly said to Kanshang and the others, if anyone dares to chase after me, this old man will take their life. Immediately after, Xiaohua's body surged with thunder as he chased after the ocean-overturning seal. Continue as before. Kanshang and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Continue the fierce battle as before? Before Xiaohua and Ji Yi arrived, tens of thousands of people had already died on the two battlefields. The ground was littered with broken limbs and blood. When the two experts appeared, although they were just confronting each other in the beginning, their intimidating aura had already affected the situation of the battle. Everyone's attacks were already somewhat sluggish. Of course, there were thousands of people who died in the process. When the two experts fought beautifully, how could the tens of thousands of people still have the mood to fight? Although they didn't clearly separate from each other, they only focused on protecting themselves and focused on the fight between the experts. At this moment, the two experts left and went a play on their own, leaving the tens of thousands of people as before, who would still have the mood to fight. Whether it was sword cultivators or Dao cultivators, their morale was completely gone. Forget it. Mingyu activated her magic treasure, Mingyu, and said to Ruosi, you and I will withdraw our disciples and wait for the outcome of the two seniors. If senior brother of the Imperial Thunder sect wins, all of you will withdraw from the Seven Extremes Ridge. All right, if senior brother Ji Yi wins, all of you will also withdraw from the Sky Patrol City. Ruosi gritted her teeth and replied. After saying that, Mingyu glanced at Kanshang. The three of them sent out their communication talismans at the same time. Following a sharp whistling sound, all the Dao cultivators and sword cultivators flew slowly and separated in an orderly manner. Don't touch the corpses of both sides' disciples for the time being. Wait until the outcome of the battle is determined. Kanshang shouted again. All right, Ruosi understood that this order was obviously beneficial to her. Without hesitation, she passed down the order. Fairy Hongxia returned to her team. Guyu also flew to the left side of the beginning of spring. Everyone was eagerly waiting, looking at the direction where Xiaohua and Ji Yi disappeared. As for Xiaohua, while chasing Ji Yi, he released his Buddhist awareness. When he saw that both sides had stopped fighting, it was exactly as he expected. Only then did he change his direction and urged Imperial Thunder Travel to rush forward. After flying straight for more than 100 miles, it was an extremely flat land. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the rainbow in the sky was exceptionally dazzling. -8. Chapter 25:10. Good. Then this old man will have no regrets even if he dies. Ji said. Huh. What does that mean? Xiaohua felt a little strange. Isn't this too discouraging? Moreover, the same words were said twice. Buzz. The seal of turning the sea roared again, and the power of imprisonment that filled the space with a huge force smashed towards Xiaohua. Come, come, come. Xiaohua held the staff in his hand, and his heart was set. The lightning around his body flashed out, and now it reached a few feet. He was really like a god. Boom, the staff waved, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was disturbed by the seal of turning the sea became even more chaotic. After the brilliance of the seal of turning the sea was scattered by the lightning, the staff effortlessly annihilated the brilliance of the seal of turning the sea again. Countless cracks appeared and disappeared in the space, setting off a wave of air that soared to the sky. This time, Xiaohua's figure was sent flying again, but he was in a much better condition. The heavenly staff technique had already eliminated this bit of weakness. As a result, the wishful steel staff and the seal of turning the sea clashed for hundreds of rounds. As the seal of turning the sea flew, and as Xiaohua flashed and moved, they really fought from the ground to the sky, and then from the sky to the ground. The seal of turning the sea was so hard, and the power of imprisonment and the weight of the seal of turning the sea were so great. It was different from the last time when Xiaohua fought with Fengbooping. Xiaohua was actually a little numb at this time. Grandma, this guy is a magic weapon after all. This young master really can't compete with him at this time. Xiaohua shook his sore thumb and secretly thought, forget it. Xiaohua shook his hand and the staff returned to the space. This young master doesn't need to use his weakness to overcome the enemy's strength. This young master has a way. While speaking, Xiaohua took out the sword pouch. Go. As Xiaohua pinched the sword, the 7 flying swords rushed out and surrounded the seal of turning the sea. The power of the 7 stars array suppressed the seal of turning the sea. You are not nameless. You are the terrifying phoenix. Ji Ye's voice came out, full of horror. Not bad. Xiaohua's body faintly circulated with magic power. His body gradually expanded, and his appearance returned to its original state. This young master is the terrifying phoenix. Good. That's why I've never heard of such a powerful cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect. Although Ji applauded, his voice was still cold. However, this Ji still doesn't know your name. Xiaohua slightly narrowed his eyes, hesitated for a moment, and said in a low voice, all right, this Ji understands. Even if I have to sacrifice my body, I will have no regrets in this battle. As Ji spoke, the light around his body became even brighter, and the faint roar of a dragon could be heard from his head. Seal. Seeing this, Xiaohua hurriedly activated the 7-star sword formation. The 7 illusory swords caught the formation and surged towards the overturning sea seal. Wong, wong, wong. The seal of turning the sea slowly rotated, resisting the power of the formation with difficulty. Damn it. Although the flying swords of the illusory swordsmen are powerful, they are not controlled by 7 illusory swordsmen. But this young master is controlling them through the sword pouch, so their power is too weak. Thinking back to that day, they were able to seal this young master, but when they were trying to seal that bastardly Chengxiu, they were actually shattered by his nascent soul hand. And now, they can't even fight against the seal of turning the sea. Io, the hand of a nascent soul. That's right, this young master also has a refined talisman, right? Although it is not the hand of a nascent soul, if this young master uses it, it might not be inferior to a nascent soul hand. Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly remembered the half-talisman he obtained when he killed Qin Yuhua in the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. He had never used that thing before, but now he could take it out and use it. While thinking, Xiaohua controlled the 7 stars great formation. He took out the damaged talisman and temporarily placed it in his bosom. Sure enough, it was as Xiaohua thought. Although the 7 stars great formation was powerful, it was beyond his ability to control it through the sword pouch. In particular, the seal of turning the sea that Ji had transformed into was extremely heavy, and its power was also extremely great. Every time it moved within the formation, it would be able to restrain the 7 flying swords and slightly disrupt the formation. This did not mean that the current Ji was much stronger than the Xiaohua of that day. It was just that Ji Ye's seal of turning the sea was a magic treasure, and its quality was much better than the 7 flying swords. Resisting the flying swords was Ji Ye's specialty. Xiaohua frowned slightly. He tried his best to control the sword pouch, directing the 7 flying swords to continuously perfect the 7 stars great formation, making it even smoother than before. However, all of a sudden, a cold divine sense penetrated the 7 stars great formation and covered the sword pouch. Immediately, Xiaohua felt that the connection between him and the sword pouch had a resistance, and as the divine sense increased, the resistance became even greater. It was as if a flowing river was mixed with mud and sand, and this mud and sand was gradually accumulating, like a dam. I understand now. Xiaohua suddenly realized Ji transformed into a magic treasure, so he has an additional ability. He can actually affect other magic treasures through magic treasures. He doesn't even need to transform into a magic treasure to affect the connection between others and his own magic treasure. This guy didn't make a move just now because he wanted to let this young master take out my magic treasure so that he could win by surprise. Ha ha ha. Fortunately, this young master also had a taboo at that time and did not dare to take out any magic treasure. If you use this move now, how will it be effective? Thinking, Xiaohua's figure swayed, and he waved his hand as if he was forming a seal. The clear water bottle was already in the Buddha's relic's hand. Release. The Buddha's relic moved slightly, and the innate true water rushed out, instantly turning into a vast ocean that surrounded the seal of turning the sea and the 7 stars great formation. And you also have innate true water? Ji Ye's shocked voice came from the seal of turning the sea. In this innate true water, he did not dare to release his divine sense too far, so he quickly withdrew it. Hee, seal of turning the sea. This young master wants to see how you can turn the sea. Saying this, Xiaohua laughed, and the Buddha's relic urged the innate true water to surge towards the seal of turning the sea. The seal of overturning the sea was indeed powerful. Wherever the brilliance went, the torrential true water would be suppressed, appearing calm and tranquil. However, in this 7 stars great array, the brilliance of the seal of overturning the sea was restricted and suppressed very severely. It could not suppress the true water for too long. However, Xiaohua's true water was really endless. Each wave was higher than the previous one. In just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the scattered light of the seal of overturning the sea was corroded by half. In particular, the seal of turning the sea was suppressed by the 7 stars great formation, and the distance it could fly was limited. It could not attack Xiaohua, and could only be suppressed by the innate true water, without any power to fight back. Needless to say, everyone knew that if the seal of turning the sea did not have any special methods, it would be defeated sooner or later. Sigh, it seemed to be an old sigh, and Ji Ye's voice was filled with endless emotion. As expected of the terrifying phoenix, do you still have a lot of methods? Your Dharma body. This old man also hopes to see it. Hee, old man. As long as you can force this Xiao to that extent, this Xiao will definitely fulfill your wish. Xiaohua also had some respect for this tool cultivator. Hearing Xiaohua actually call him old man, Ji sighed again and said, "This old man has been in this world for nearly 1,000 years. What?" Xiaohua was shocked and said anxiously, "Old man, what did you say? You are 1,000 years old?" "Oh, yes, this old man is about 930 years old." Ji was also surprised. What's so strange about this? Although little friend Xiao looks like a teenager, I'm afraid you are at least 600 years old, right? Hee, little friend Xiao, do you think this old man is too old? With your 600 years old cultivation, you can fight this old man to a draw. You can be proud. This, Xiaohua was embarrassed. He understood in his heart that the cultivation he displayed was at the late stage of gold core. If it was the cultivation speed of an ordinary cultivator, 600 years old would be considered normal. Sigh. I can't let little friend Xiao be proud. This old man is slow-witted. On one side, Ji was resisting the innate true water and the 7 stars great array. On the other hand, he was actually speaking frankly with Xiaohua, and even called him little friend. This really made Xiaohua somewhat puzzled. You also know, this old man's background is similar to yours. I entered the Tao through martial arts, but this old man's aptitude is not good. I couldn't practice the Tao, so I could only escape to the sword domain, and was accepted as a disciple by the Bronze Bell sect. Actually, in this old man's heart, I'm afraid I'm the same as you. I don't put any tool cultivators in my eyes. I even think it's an unorthodox technique. No, Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, this Xiao has never thought about it. There are 3,000 Das in the world. Who knows which one is the straight path? Tool cultivators, bird cultivators, sword cultivators, and Tao cultivators. Each have their own Das. While speaking, Xiaohua's control of the innate true water also slackened a lot, but he was still careful, afraid that Ji would do something strange. Little friend Xiao has such thoughts. You're really magnanimous. In the future, you'll definitely become a great person. Ji praised. I don't dare. Although this old man has entered the door of tool cultivators, my progress is still slow. I failed to fuse with magic tools. Ji said again. Just when this old man's heart was disheartened, I met a soul cultivator training in the sword domain. This soul cultivator's cultivation was profound, and like little friend Xiao, she was magnanimous. She didn't look down on this old man because I'm a tool cultivator. This old man is ashamed. Seeing her that day was like seeing a celestial being. In order to accompany her to a secret place, I disregarded the sect's rules. Hee, old man, who hasn't been young before. Even if you make a mistake, the heavens will forgive you. Xiaohua said with a smile. The Buddhist seal controlling the innate true water decreased by a bit. Yes, thinking about those 3 days, it was only 3 days. It made this old man think back 1,000 years. Ji also said with a smile. This old man clearly remembers that her name was Ziyin, an elegant, gentle name, just like the purple jasmine flower in the sword tomb, with an earth-shattering splendor, but restrained divine splendor, not arrogant at all. Ziyin? Ziyi? Xiaohua was stunned. Why are they both surnamed Zi? Could it be that Ziyi is a soul cultivator? However, before Xiaohua could think more, Ji said again, unfortunately, it's already been 1,000 years. I don't know if she's still alive in this world. -8. Chapter 25:11. Old Master Ji. Xiaohua said with a smile, I don't know much about soul cultivation techniques, but if the cultivators of my Tao sect can cultivate to the nascent soul stage, their lifespan can reach 2,000 years. Besides, you've lived for nearly 1,000 years. How can he not have a reason? That's true, but how many people actually have such an opportunity? Jiye's voice rang out from within the seal of the ocean. The reason why I was able to live for so long was because of this seal of the ocean. My primordial spirit gradually fused with the seal of the ocean, and my body fused with it. Naturally, my lifespan was extended. If I had cultivated a Taoist art, I probably would have been reduced to a pile of bones long ago. Sigh. Speaking of the sea overturning seal, it was also Ziyan's fortuitous encounter. In front of the secret plane, Ziyan encountered a Tai bisect cultivator. The two of them fought, and the Tai bisect cultivator was the one with the sea overturning seal. However, Ziyan was slightly inferior to that cultivator and had almost died in that cultivator's hands. When this old man saw this, my blood boiled, and I didn't care about anything else. I rushed forward and used my body to shield Ziyan. I only wanted to die for her. Good. Xiaohua couldn't help but cry out, giving a thumbs up and praising. Unfortunately, this old man was wrong. Jiye's voice rang out. What was this old man's cultivation at that time? How could he possibly block the sea overturning seal for Ziyan? Everything was just Ziyan's plan to lure the enemy. This old man is just imagining things. Old master, your block is not bad. You finally have an opportunity. Hearing Ji mention the seal of turning the sea, how could Xiaohua not know that there was something fishy about it? He smiled and said, that is indeed the case. Ji didn't deny it. If it wasn't for this old master blocking that attack and sustaining heavy injuries, I wouldn't have been able to escape. Not only will this seal not fall into this old man's hands, This old man will also not be able to obtain a secret technique of soul cultivation. Oh? Xiao Hua nodded slightly. In fact, it's a secret technique that fuses the primordial spirit with the magical equipment. Ji didn't hide anything and said, that day, when Ziyin taught me the seal of overturning the sea and the secret technique. She clearly said that my aptitude was too poor and my primordial spirit was too weak. I couldn't cultivate at all, not even as an artifact cultivator. If you force yourself to cultivate, in the end, your primordial spirit will definitely dissipate into the magic treasure, and your body will become the body. Ah? Old man, you are. Xiao Hua suddenly understood and hurriedly stopped the activation of the Xiantian True Water. After telling Ji about this, Xiao Hua's killing intent also decreased a lot. Little friend Xiao is indeed a kind person. Ji smiled and said, however, it's all too late. Earlier, this old man was a bit hesitant. After all, this old man has already fused with the seal of ocean overturning for 1,000 years. The seal of ocean overturning's coldness is constantly attacking this old man's primordial spirit. If this old man were to fight with you, I'm afraid that my primordial spirit would have already reached the end of dissipation. The old man has always said, even if I die, I have no regrets. That's what he means, right? Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. That's right. To be able to fight a magnanimous cultivator like little friend Xiao, it is indeed this old man's wish. Ji continued. This old man fused his body into an artifact to fight against the heavens, to fight against humans, right? If I can't fight, why did I make that choice 1,000 years ago? Since this old man has chosen this path, I will definitely walk it to the end without any hesitation. Yes, this little one understands. Xiao Hua was filled with deep veneration towards Ji Yi. This little one will definitely fulfill the old man's wish. I'm afraid that in another hour, this old man's primordial spirit will dissipate. Before this old man died, I had some regrets. After saying so much, I only hope that someone in this world can understand some of this old man's thoughts. Even if I'm an artifact cultivator, a beast cultivator, even if I'm an unorthodox cultivator in the eyes of you Dao cultivators, behind everyone's back is a sad story. Behind everyone's back is the blood and sweat of struggle. All right, Xiao Hua slightly bit his lips and replied in a low voice. This little one is actually also a loose cultivator. I also have some feelings towards this. Haha, forget it. This old man has lived for 1,000 years, and every day, I've been fighting against the erosion of this magic weapon. Now is the time to end it. Come, come, come. It's useless to say more. Let this old man see your magic power. If you can withstand this old man's final attack, this old man will give you a surprise. As soon as he finished speaking, the seal of Turn the Ocean flashed with an intense brilliance. A rumbling sound that seemed to be able to overturn mountains and seas could be heard. Then, a force that was several times stronger than before was generated, resisting the 7 stars array's confinement force. Rise! Xiao Hua did not hesitate and hurriedly used the Buddhist seal, activating the innate true water. On one hand, he corroded and suppressed the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea, and on the other hand, he tried his best to stabilize the 7 stars great array. Seeing that the waves were several times stronger than before, Xiao Hua waved his hand, holding the wishful staff in his hand, and entered the 7 stars great array, smashing towards the seal of Turning the Sea. Xiao Hua understood that the best way now was to use all his means to fight against the seal of Turning the Sea and send Ji Yi on his way. Boom, boom, boom. Xiao Hua waved the wishful staff casually, and every time it touched the brilliance of the seal of Turning the Sea, it made a roaring sound. Although the seal of Turning the Sea trembled slightly each time, it always stood tall and strong, like a cornerstone. Tisk, tisk, Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. This kind of magic treasure can truly display the power of a magic treasure. It's a pity that I can't try this secret technique. Even if I get this seal of Turning the Sea, I'm afraid it won't have such power. Just as he was thinking, Xiao Hua became alert again. Previously, Ji withdrew his divine sense because he was afraid of being corroded by the innate true water, but now, he sent it out again. through the 7 stars great array and the innate true water to cover the sword pouch. He wanted to use the sword pouch to destroy the 7 stars great array. Hee. The corners of Xiao Hua's mouth curled into a smile as he took out the soul-absorbing bell and the toad. His soul thread swayed, and with a loud dang, the ice-cold divine sense abruptly withdrew as if it was bitten by a venomous snake. Xiao Hua seized the opportunity to pursue and strike the bell twice more. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, the divine sense retracted, but the brilliance of the seal of turning the sea became even more brilliant. In fact, as the sealing power of the seal of turning the sea increased, the 7 stars great array faintly showed signs of losing control. Roar! Suddenly, there was a loud rumble. The innate true water was knocked dozens of meters away by the seal of turning the sea. The entire 7 stars great array also lost control in an instant. The seal of turning the sea gained its freedom and circled in the air for a bit before flying off into the distance. Not good. Seeing that the seal of turning the sea was about to leave and that Ji Ye's voice didn't come, Xiao Hua immediately understood. Ji Ye's primordial spirit had most likely disappeared. Although he said there was still some time, it was only because of his powerful attack and the use of the soul armament that it collapsed a step earlier. And that last attack just now should be Ji Ye's final move. Where do you think you're going? Xiao Hua flew up and slapped his hand, taking out the giant hand talisman. Under the urging of his magic power, the magic power around Xiao Hua's body was instantly sucked into the talisman. Wang, with a loud rumble, a giant hand of several meters in size appeared in the air, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 100 meters of the area also swarmed over and fused into the giant hand. You can stay here. Xiao Hua formed a hand seal. The giant hand scooped up in the air, and a powerful force firmly covered the seal of turning the sea. The seal of turning the sea that originally flew dozens of meters away was like an eagle spreading its wings. Although it let out a buzzing sound, it still couldn't move even half a foot. Immediately, Xiao Hua urged the giant hand. That giant hand slowly closed, wanting to grab the seal of turning the sea. Woo! The seal of turning the sea suddenly shrank and rushed towards the giant hand. With a loud rumble, the seal of turning the sea actually smashed into the giant hand. Not good, Xiao Hua said to himself. The giant hand talisman was originally damaged. How could it withstand the full power of the seal of turning the sea? However, Xiao Hua didn't panic. He urged the innate true water to quickly wrap around the giant hand. The 7 stars great formation also rushed outside the innate true water. With another loud rumble, the seal of turning the sea indeed broke free from the giant hand's control. Following that, the giant hand turned into another talisman and floated down, while the seal of turning the sea itself rushed into the innate true water. Haha, this young master wants to see where you can run. Seeing that the seal of turning the sea that had fallen into the innate true water no longer had its previous radiance, and that the space it opened was getting smaller and smaller, Xiao Hua laughed loudly. But then, a kind of sadness emerged in his heart. Ji was like a spring flower in autumn. In order to pursue the peak of cultivation, he burned his life away at the last moment of the battle. He seemed to be untimely, but it also seemed to be a matter of course. Admittedly, he got what he wanted, but Ji wasn't the first to have this kind of pursuit, and he definitely wouldn't be the last. Perhaps there would never be the last. The path of cultivation was long and endless. Who didn't seek it in loneliness? This kind of opponent was worthy of respect and was hard to meet, but at the same time, he could also be kept in his heart. Xiao Hua's heart was filled with sorrow. He waved his hands, and countless thick, heavenly lightning fell from the sky and landed on the seal of turning the sea. It was as if only this kind of sacred, heavenly lightning could represent Xiao Hua's respect for Ji Yi. Sure enough, following the baptism of the heavenly lightning, the seal of turning the sea's radiance became smaller and smaller. Even the fine lines and talismans on it could be seen clearly. Old Master Ji. Xiao Hua stared at the seal of turning the sea and said in a low voice, although you are arrogant and think that this kid's cultivation is only at the late gold core stage, you are still wrong. You are only at the second or third stage of the illusory sword realm. With your cultivation, although you can make the seal of turning the sea display its power, and even challenge the limit of the seal of turning the sea in the end, the seal of turning the sea that you have turned into is still not this kid's match. Of course, now that you have turned into a tool, this seal of turning the sea will be this kid's magic treasure in the future. This kid will definitely make this seal of turning the sea proud and truly suppress the four seas. Immediately after, Xiaohua put away the true water. The Buddha Sarira chanted incantations, wanting to transcend Ji Yi. Who would have thought that Ji Ye's soul wasn't here at all? This seems to be similar to the situation with the 12 flying swords. Xiaohua was slightly surprised. At the same time that he put away the Buddha's Sarira, he called out Goldie. He let Goldie watch at the side. After waiting for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the radiance on the seal of turning the sea completely disappeared. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to fly into the great array and release his divine sense. He spat a mouthful of essence blood on the seal of turning the sea and began to refine it according to the method of refining the cloud-suppressing seal. Following Xiaohua's refining, the seal of turning the sea began to flicker. The dragon body that was coiling around the seal also began to move. -8. Chapter 25:12. After the yellow light flickered and flickered several times, a strand of divine sense rushed into Xiaohua's mind from the seal of turning sea. Oh! Xiaohua was startled. He was about to activate God guidance, but he sensed that this was a weak remnant thought. He hurriedly wrapped it with his divine sense, and the information inside was projected into Xiaohua's mind. This is the surprise old Master Ji was talking about? After a while, Xiaohua frowned, and his expression was indescribable. Return, Xiaohua pointed his finger, and the seal of turning sea slowly shrunk, turning into a palm-sized seal and falling into his hand. Looking at this intact magic treasure, Xiaohua sighed with emotion. This seemed to be the first intact magic treasure he had obtained. Unfortunately, today's movement was too big. Tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators witnessed it. Won't this young master's heroic appearance spread throughout Sky Patrol City in the future? This seal of turning sea can't be used. Xiaohua thought smugly. Then, Xiaohua suddenly exclaimed, Loss, loss. Old Master Ji, where's your storage pouch? Why didn't I see it? Ji Yi turned into a tool, and all his things disappeared. Where did his storage pouch go? Could it be that he didn't bring it when he came out? Thinking about it, Xiaohua really couldn't be sure whether he saw Ji Ye's storage pouch or not. Forget it. Presumably, the old man knew that he didn't have much time left, so he left everything to his disciples and grand-disciples. Xiaohua put away the seal of turning sea, the sword pouch and 7 flying swords, and jumped into the sky, flying towards the 7 Extremes Ridge. When he arrived at the battlefield, Xiaohua still turned into Wu Ming, and the cultivators all cheered when they saw Xiaohua return. And Ruasi looked like a funeral. Kansheng was naturally the first to come up, and he bowed. Kansheng of Canlei Palace greets Senior Martial Brother Wu Ming. May I know which disciple's master is Senior Martial Brother Wu Ming? Xiaohua looked at him and waved his hand. Don't ask who I am, I'm just passing by. You wouldn't know who my disciple is even if I told you. Yes, this disciple knows. Kansheng didn't dare to say more. Many thanks to Senior Brother Nameless for saving my life. Ming Yu's eyes glowed as she bowed. When did I save your life? Xiaohua blinked his eyes, not understanding. It seems that I saved my own wife, right? However, Xiaohua still waved his hand. No need, no need. This old man is just passing by. You can continue. Dare I ask, Senior? Ruasi didn't dare to step forward. She bowed and asked, Senior Apprentice Brother Ji, this old man has returned. Where do you think Ji Yi went? Xiaohua didn't answer. Instead, he said, although some people have gone, they still live in this world. Just like some people who didn't go, they might not live in this world. Ruasi was confused, but she understood Ji Ye's fate. Thinking about Ji Yi and Yunbai, she couldn't help but feel sad. Senior Martial Brother, we've already come to an agreement. Now that Senior Brother has returned, I hope that Senior Brother can make the decision. Should we let the sword cultivators of the Seven Extremes Ridge leave? Kanshang cupped his hands and asked, Let's do as you've already agreed. Xiaohua waved his hand. He knew that if he didn't agree, there would definitely be tens of thousands of lives buried here. Thinking about Ji Yi, perhaps not every sword cultivator was so warlike, murderous, and ferocious. Many thanks, Senior. Ruasi's heart sank. Then she hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Forget it. You kill me, I kill you. When will it end? Xiaohua waved his hand and flew into the sky. He flicked his sleeves and said, Oh, right? Just pretend I didn't say anything. You can continue. Senior, suddenly, Guyu jumped out from beside Li Chun and shouted, Oh! Xiaohua was startled. From now on, Junior will withdraw from the war and won't stain anyone's blood. Guyu shouted, It can't be. If someone wants to kill you, you won't fight back? Xiaohua naturally recognized Guyu. Seeing that she was talking to him so seriously, he couldn't help but laugh. Of course Junior can't not fight back. Guyu's face was somewhat red. All right, you can do whatever you want. Just pretend this old man didn't come here. Xiaohua said, his gaze sweeping over everyone's faces. When he saw the faintly discernible laughter in Fairy Hong Xia's eyes, he was startled. Damn it. Like I said, I can't hide it from my wife. I had better hurry up and leave. After being disturbed by Guyu, this girl, I really can't explain it clearly. Senior brother, where are you going? Kanshang hurriedly shouted. Nonsense. Naturally I'm going to the place I want to go. Xiaohua didn't answer at all. He only muttered in his stomach. Lightning flashed around his body again, and he rushed out with lightning. Seeing this senior brother of his with incomparable magical power leave with lightning majestically, Kanshang still scratched his head. Which senior brother of Heavenly Thunder Palace is this? How come I don't have any impression of him? Fairy Hongxia was actually like Xiaohua thought. She looked up and down at Guyu, who was standing in the sky far away, somewhat pensive. Xiaohua came. The battle situation of Seven Extremes Ridge changed. Xiaohua left. The victory of Seven Extremes Ridge was also set. Imperial Thunder Sect and Huanhua Sect originally came to spy on the strength of the sword cultivators in Seven Extremes Ridge. They didn't expect to take down Seven Extremes Ridge in one fell swoop. It was imaginable that they were wild with joy. However, it wasn't known whether this battle had the same purpose as the meeting in Sky Patrol City. Of course, this was not something Xiaohua could know. This guy was now flying in the direction of Flowing Ice Valley. At the same time, he took out his severely damaged cloud-suppressing seal and thought about how to integrate the seal of turning the sea into the cloud-suppressing seal. If he didn't make use of such a powerful magic weapon, wouldn't it be too wasteful? However, if he hid this thing in the cloud-suppressing seal, although the idea was a novel one, this novel idea was too small. He couldn't figure it out. Forget it. Forget it. Xiaohua was somewhat annoyed. Just treat it as a wasted trip today. Sigh. And this thunder-controlling seal, can't you lower your voice a little? Why is your voice so loud? People can hear it from afar. How could Kanshang of Imperial Thunder Palace not tell that it was thunder-controlling seal? I don't know how he would report it to Qianemo. Damn it. That black and ugly sword cultivator didn't die in vain. If she didn't sneak attack my wife, how could this young master use thunder-controlling seal? Humph. Luckily, she was corroded to death by the innate true water. If she didn't die, this young master will let her taste the feeling of being struck by lightning. In short, Xiaohua's heart was depressed. Although he saved Fairy Hongxia, there was a possibility that he would be exposed. Thunder-controlling seal, that was a lightning escape technique that even Qian Lazi couldn't cultivate. How could a golden core disciple cultivate it? If Qian Lazi found out, no. Even if Qianemo found out, he would definitely search the entire Sky Patrol City for him. In this world, there was no wall that didn't have a crack. Once someone found out, even if the secret of the space wouldn't be discovered, what about the cultivation of the Buddhist sect? It was really hard to say. Also, how did that little girl Guyu recognize this young master? Xiaohua was puzzled again. Could it be that this young master is the only one in the thunder-controlling sect who can control the heavenly lightning? Humph. This young master's phoenix celestial body is already gone. Even if you beat me to death, this young master will not admit it. But if a cultivator wants to know the truth, do they need to beat you to death? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua almost cried. This is really a loss. Senior Ji, where's your storage pouch? Why didn't you reveal it in my spirit sense? Li Zongbao is still the most loyal. Xiao Hua unconsciously made a decision. From now on, this young master will definitely not enter Sky Patrol City. This young master wants to see which nascent soul cultivator dares to find trouble with this young master. Flowing Ice Valley and Seven Extremes Ridge were not in the same direction. Even if Xiao Hua used thunder-controlling seal, the rolling thunder resounded through the sky, but it still took him more than 10 days to reach the vicinity. In these 10 days, Xiao Hua did not do anything else. He was in a dilemma. He felt that the deeper he went into the war, the greater the possibility of him being exposed. It felt like he was in a quagmire. Flowing Ice Valley was an area of 1,000 miles, much larger than Seven Extremes Ridge. In this area, there was a surging river. The source was naturally a few extremely tall snow mountains in the Huan Kingdom. First, the snow on the snow mountains melted slightly under the sun. These few drops slowly flowed, turning into a dozen drops. Gradually, these dozen drops gathered again, turning into hundreds of drops, thousands of drops, and finally into a trickle. These trickles flowed down from different snow mountains, and under the uncanny workmanship of the heavenly way, they gathered together again, turning into a small stream. The small stream flowed out from the snow region of the Huan Kingdom, gradually reaching the border between the Huan Kingdom and the Shi Kingdom. During this period, other streams converged and finally formed a river that was dozens of feet long. This river meandered through the rugged valley. Ice fragments flowed down from the valley and the cold in the valley. Large amounts of ice flowed in the river, and thus, Flowing Ice Valley became famous. The river in Flowing Ice Valley still flowed into Shi and even into Lian. As for whether it flowed into Guihe Sea or not, Xiao Hua did not know. However, when he saw the turbulent river in the valley, he could not help but sigh at the magnificence of the heavenly Tao. The snowy plateau is extremely cold. All the flowing water has turned into ice. Even if it can flow, it is still under the ice. Here, the mountain range is at least 1,000 miles. The cold wind cannot directly blow in. Because the temperature in Flowing Ice Valley is higher, the river does not need to be completely frozen. This is why it can become a river of ice. If I did not see it with my own eyes, how could I believe that this extremely cold plateau has such a wondrous scene? Seeing the turbulent river in Flowing Ice Valley, almost comparable to the cold river of Tianmin Mountain, Xiao Hua could not help but sigh with emotion. Immediately after, Xiao Hua released his Buddhist sense and scanned the area within 100 miles. He did not see any trace of Li Zongbao's group, so he used the bright thunder escape to fly towards the depths of Flowing Ice Valley. He also took out his token to constantly check the situation inside. After flying for another hour, he saw that he had reached the depths of Flowing Ice Valley. The temperature was a bit warmer, and the ice in the river had decreased. Moreover, the river path was even more steep. The river water rumbled, but there was still no trace of Li Zongbao's group. -8. Chapter 25:13. Strange, could it be that the fight is already over? Xiao Hua pinched his chin as he pondered. At this moment, a corpse suddenly emerged from the flowing ice in the rushing river. Soon after, it sank to the bottom of the river. The traces of blood left on the river's surface gradually dissipated. Seeing this, Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes. Since there are corpses following the river, there must be a fight in the upper reaches of the river. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hastily released his Buddhist sense and flew in the direction of the river. However, he only flew for a moment before giving up. This river was winding and rugged, and it actually circled around the mountain ridge. He couldn't fly around the mountain ridge, right? Rushing high into the sky, Xiao Hua hastily flew in the direction of the extreme north. Sure enough, in the time it took to eat a meal on the distant mountain ridge, he saw a dozen or so swordsmen surrounding several middle-stage Foundation establishment Cool Breeze Valley cultivators and attacking them. The Cool Breeze Valley cultivators were already unable to hold on. They were already showing signs of defeat and could only barely hold on under the sword light. There weren't any other cultivators nearby. In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they would definitely die in the hands of the sword cultivators. "Don't hurt my Dao sect cultivators," Xiaohua shouted loudly. With a wave of his hand, he took out his devil hammer and rushed towards the mountain ridge. Ha ha ha, sure enough, someone is courting death. A bald swordsman looked up and laughed loudly. Just now, I was saying that these cultivators weren't important enough. Now, another middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator is sent over. As he spoke, the swordsman pointed his finger. A greenwood sword flew out from the fierce battle and stabbed towards Xiaohua's direction. How dare you? At this moment, how could Xiaohua put this swordsman in his eyes? Seeing the greenwood-like flying sword rushing towards him, without waiting for the sword light to change, he covered it with his Taoist robe and immediately took the greenwood sword in his hand. He completely cut off the connection between the flying sword and the sword cultivator and casually threw it into the space. Ah? The swordsman's eyes widened in shock. He was somewhat unable to react. This didn't conform to the way of the sword. How could a foundation establishment cultivator take away the flying sword of the swordsman with his bare hands? While he was still in shock, Xiaohua suddenly sped up. He used the same old method, swinging the demonic hammer in his hand and smashing it down on the sword cultivator's forehead. The sword cultivator was shocked. The demonic hammer was coming at him with a suffocating aura. The sharp sound of the wind was extremely ear-piercing. Without hesitation, he spat out his intrinsic dagger. He wanted to block the demonic hammer, but he quickly retreated. It was exactly the same as when Xiaohua killed a sword cultivator in the past. With a dang sound, the flying sword was cleverly smashed by Xiaohua on the sword's spine and was shot down. As deep cracks appeared on the surface of the sword, the swordsman's primordial spirit was severely injured, and he was extremely dispirited. Following that, there was another pu sound as the demonic hammer smashed into the sword cultivator's forehead without exception. Following that, the sword cultivator's corpse fell into the river. Strangely, the corpse didn't float, but sank directly into the river. Hiss! Xiaohua smoothly killed the swordsman like flowing ice in the river. The swordsmen who were watching the show as usual felt their hearts tremble. At the same time, Xiaohua clapped his hand again and took out the soul-sucking bell and the toad. With a loud dang sound, among the dozen or so sword cultivators, 4 of them immediately lost consciousness. The other 10 or so swordsmen swayed slightly and frowned. They weren't affected by the soul-sucking bell. Be careful. This cultivator actually has a soul tool. One of the swordsmen, who looked old, hastily shouted. Don't worry. We've been fighting soul cultivators in Shuiyu Mountain for so many years, how could we not know? Another 6th-rank swordsman shouted. He pointed his finger, and an azure sword light rushed out and stabbed at Xiaohua. Similarly, another 2 6th-rank swordsmen urged on their flying swords and stabbed at Xiaohua at the same time. Oh? These swordsmen aren't affected by the soul-sucking bell? Xiaohua was slightly surprised, but when he heard the swordsman's words, he instantly understood. These 5th and 6th-rank swordsmen must have fought soul cultivators before. They were similar to the swordsmen Xiaohua had met before. Either they had a secret technique, or they had a soul tool to protect them. As the war continues, the sword cultivators we meet are becoming more and more powerful. Xiaohua was silent. He put the soul-sucking bell into his space, and with a wave of his hand, the universe in the sleeve technique came out one after another. The swift and fierce flying swords of the 3 swordsmen were immediately trapped by a strong sealing force. Before they could urge on their sword energy, Xiaohua put their flying swords into his storage bag. Hurry up and leave. This cultivator's secret technique is powerful. The old swordsman who had warned Xiaohua just now had been paying attention to this place. Seeing Xiaohua easily put away the flying swords of the 3 swordsmen, he was already alarmed. Without the slightest hesitation, he shouted loudly. Completely ignoring the several Cool Breeze Valley cultivators, he stepped on his flying sword and rushed over, bringing 2 of the swordsmen with him into the blue sky. The remaining 10 or so swordsmen really did follow orders. Even though one of the swordsmen's flying sword had already pierced the chest of a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator, he still put away his flying sword and flew in the direction of the old swordsman in a group of 3. The 3 of them didn't fly very fast, and each group maintained a certain distance from each other. In fact, the last group even waited for the swordsman whose flying sword Xiao Hua put away in midair. SK Tisk. If Xiao Hua had chased after them, he would naturally have been able to easily kill them all. However, looking at these swordsmen who were merely 6th stage swordsmen, Xiao Hua stood with his hands clasped behind his back and inwardly nodded. Not bad, they really do have a fighting style. Cultivators like us can't compare to them. Seeing that Xiao Hua actually didn't chase after them, not only were the anxious swordsmen puzzled, even the Cool Breeze Valley disciples who flew over to express their thanks were also puzzled. After greeting and expressing their thanks, a slightly older Cool Breeze Valley disciple smiled apologetically and said, "Junior Martial Brother Xiao, these sword cultivators have killed many of my Cool Breeze Valley's disciples. We hate ourselves for not having the ability to kill enemies. Senior Martial Brother Liu." Xiao Hua hastily waved his hand and said, "It's not that little brother doesn't want to kill them. You also saw that little brother only relied on a secret technique. But this thing consumes a lot of transcendence energy, and it's only pleasing to the eye but useless. If they see a flaw, little brother's life won't be guaranteed. In addition, little brother still has to look for Senior Martial Brother Li Zongbao, so I can't waste any more time. Right. Where is the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley? Which fellow Taoist is willing to take little brother there?" Well, hearing that Xiao Hua wanted someone to take him to the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley, these disciples shrunk their necks one by one and no longer made a sound. It seems that these Cool Breeze Valley disciples escaped from the battlefield in Flowing Ice Valley, right? Xiao Hua muttered to himself, thinking about how the sword cultivators retreated in an orderly manner just now. He was slightly anxious in his heart. The difference was really too big. If it weren't for his powerful transcendence energy, he definitely wouldn't dare to go there. Fellow Taoists, you only need to tell little brother the direction and location. Xiao Hua hastily changed his words again. There's a problem with the communication token between little brother and Senior Martial Brother Li Zongbao. All right, Junior Martial Brother Xiao knows. The old disciple hastily smiled apologetically again. It's not that we can't go. Don't say any more. Xiao Hua hastily waved his hand. Little brother understands in his heart that there's a choice between life and death. This is my nature. Senior Martial Brother knows. Just tell me the location. You can either wait again or go straight to the Sky Patrol City. Little brother hasn't seen anyone today. Yes, I understand. The disciple's face was obviously relieved. He hastily told Xiao Hua the location, and Xiao Hua didn't say anything else. His figure floated up and flew towards the location that the disciple said. As for where these Cool Breeze Valley disciples would go, it wasn't Xiao Hua's concern. He kept flying north for more than 40 miles, and he saw a mountain peak standing in the middle of the river like a mainstay. All the flowing ice that rushed to this place was blocked by this mountain peak and shattered. Then, the river water was divided into 2 halves. One half was slightly cool and slightly oval, while the other half was slightly turbid and slightly wavy. Xiao Hua flew to the turbid area, and with a sweep of his divine sense, his hands formed a water-repelling seal, and his figure rushed straight into the river water. He plunged straight into the river water for more than 10 feet, and he saw that there were more than 10 holes in the mountain peak. Xiao Hua picked one up and rushed into it. Naturally, there was river water in the cave, but the cave was very long. After flying along the cave for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, his eyes suddenly opened up. The river water had disappeared, and what appeared in front of Xiao Hua was an endless karst cave. Hiss! Xiao Hua stood in the air, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The karst cave was filled with the smell of blood, and the ground was covered with corpses. The stone walls, the ground, and everywhere else were covered in dirty blood. However, when Xiao Hua released his divine sense and Buddhist sense, he found that they were limited by the special stone walls of this place and couldn't go very far. This flowing ice valley is so difficult to enter. and it's really a case of one man holding back 10,000 men. The cultivators of my Dao sect were able to enter, and they suffered heavy casualties. Xiao Hua clapped his hands, took out the Yang Leaf fan, and flew in after finding a direction. It seemed that the battle in Flowing Ice Valley had come to an end. Although there were some swordsmen and cultivators who survived, Xiao Hua didn't care. He passed through one karst cave after another, and flew towards the innermost part of the spirit stone vein. After the time it took to eat a meal, and who knew how many corpses he had seen, Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. At this moment, the token in his hand suddenly moved. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He immersed his divine sense in to take a look, and his figure immediately turned left and flew towards a dark karst cave. Sure enough, just as he turned a few corners, he heard a rumbling sound of thunder in front of him and the faint sound of collision. Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he used the Devil Realm's concealment technique and quietly rushed in. He saw that this was an incomparably huge underground karst cave, and this karst cave was connected to one another. It was probably tens of li in size, and there were many stalactites hanging from the stone walls above his head, and they were actually tens of zhang high. Looking at his feet, there were also some large and small stalactites, and they flickered with a strange brilliance. This space was so big, so wide, and he didn't know how deep he was in Flowing Ice Valley. Damn it, if it weren't for those few Cool Breeze Valley disciples, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to find this place in my lifetime. Xiao Hua released his Buddhist sense, and he had already seen that there were tens of thousands of cultivators fighting in this underground karst cave, and it wasn't too difficult to find Li Zongbao. -8. Chapter 25:14. Sure enough, Xiao Hua flew to the highest point of the cliff. Just as he flew a few miles, he heard a familiar voice shouting, "Don't go! Eat my whip!" Damn it! Xiao Hua swept with his Buddhist awareness and immediately recognized Li Zongbao, who was holding the piercing immortal whip in his hand. That dazzling yellow piercing immortal whip streaked across the sky like a golden dragon and rushed into the flying sword of a drawing swordsman. However, Xiao Hua saw that the shadow of the piercing immortal whip was abnormally clear, and there was only one shadow. He knew that Li Zongbao's magic power should be almost exhausted. Just as he expected, Li Zongbao's opponent was a tall and fat middle-aged swordsman. Just his figure alone was 2 times bigger than Li Zongbao. Seeing the piercing immortal whip coming, the fat swordsman's face showed disdain. The sword in his hand changed slightly. The shadow of the sword changed instantly and turned into a huge solid ice, blocking the piercing immortal whip. Poof! The piercing immortal whip rushed into the solid ice, shattering the sword light in the middle. Moreover, as Li Zongbao formed another seal, the piercing immortal whip violently swung, as if it wanted to crush the shadow of the sword. Who would have thought that the solid ice would also let out a sword cry at the same time? All the sword lights were like flowing ice in Flowing Ice Valley, wrapping around the piercing immortal whip in an instant. The sword lights pierced into the shadow of the whip, and the yellow brilliance drilled in. Explode! Li Zongbao's face flashed with a trace of redness. The seal in his hand changed again. The brilliance of the piercing immortal whip brightened, and all the brilliance seemed to leave the body. Following Li Zongbao's shout, it suddenly exploded. With a loud rumbling sound, all the sword lights turned into fireflies and scattered in all directions. The middle-aged swordsman's body shook violently. Obviously, his flying sword was damaged and he was seriously injured. However, he still gritted his teeth and formed another seal with all his might, wanting to take back his flying sword. But at this moment, a huge halo suddenly fell from the sky and wrapped around the swordsman's waist. The swordsman was shocked. He hurriedly jumped up and lowered his head. The small life sword in his mouth pierced towards the halo. However, he was still too slow. He saw a sawtooth shape suddenly appear on the circle of light. It spun rapidly and shrank rapidly. Before the swordsman's intrinsic sword could fly out, it immediately sliced the swordsman in half. The sword light on the swordsman's body flickered rapidly before he lost his life. Immediately after, a black shadow rushed over from a corner not far away and grabbed the swordsman's storage pouch. At the same time, The broken flying sword was also put into the storage pouch. Who else could it be but Xiao Mao? Xiao Mao was the one who had deftly turned the light ring into a universe ring. Xiao Mao stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers at Li Zongbao. Once again, he slipped into the darkness like a cat. At the same time, he activated the invisibility talisman and his entire body disappeared. Li Zongbao's expression did not change. He turned a deaf ear to Xiao Mao's signal. With a wave of his hand, the immortal piercing whip that had lost its luster fell into his hand. He reached into his storage pouch and took out a jade bottle. Without even looking, he poured out a few elixirs and swallowed them. After waiting for a while, Li Zongbao's face gradually returned to normal. He raised his eyes and looked around. There were no swordsmen within 100 feet of him. The closest ones were 2 disciples of the middle foundation establishment stage and 2 disciples of the 3rd grade. Although it was a bit difficult, it was not dangerous. Sigh. Li Zongbao sighed inexplicably. Although he could still use his divine thoughts, he could not help but turn his head and look at the entrance of the karst cave. However, there was still a lot of fighting at the entrance of the karst cave. Hundreds of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators blocked Li Zongbao's line of sight, making it impossible for him to see if that person was at the entrance of the karst cave. This kind of helplessness made him feel even more helpless. Li Zongbao originally thought that as the number 1 person below the golden core stage, he would be like a fish in water in this battle of Dao cultivators. However, the cruelty of reality taught him a lesson. An individual's cultivation would always be insignificant on this battlefield where thousands or even tens of thousands of people were involved in a battle. Unless this person's cultivator could control this battle, could Li Zongbao's cultivation do it? Obviously, he could not. Against a 6th grade swordsman, Li Zongbao could easily kill him with disdain. Li Zongbao would be able to kill 10 swordsmen who were at the 6th grade of unsheathed swords. But against 100? Not to mention 100, even against 26th grade swordsmen, Li Zongbao knew that he would not be able to win easily. Even if he could perish together with them, it would be good enough. Thinking back to the day when he mocked those cultivators who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, Li Zongbao could not help but laugh bitterly. Those cultivators did not know the immensity of heaven and earth, but they also knew the importance of teamwork. Hundreds of them attacked together, but he was alone. With the permission of the meeting hall, he was abnormally arrogant and wanted to kill Qin Jian. How could he kill Qin Jian? That was an illusory swordsman. Furthermore, all the cultivators did not know whether Qin Jian was a 2nd grade or 3rd grade illusory swordsman. Furthermore, none of the cultivators who saw Qin Jian returned alive. It seemed that the one who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth should be him. If it was before coming to Flowing Ice Valley, Li Zongbao was still a little disdainful of swordsmen. He felt that they were just so, and he had killed many of them. However, after fighting with the swordsmen of Flowing Ice Valley for half a day, Li Zongbao realized that the swordsmen of Flowing Ice Valley were very different from the ones he had met before. Not only were they very experienced in fighting, but their methods were also very ruthless. They often had some unexpected methods that made Li Zongbao tremble in fear. Thinking back to the day when he came to help the ambushed disciples of the Utopia faction, and then thinking back to the dozens of sword cultivators he had killed in the past half a day, Li Zongbao's heart was a little red. Among the dozens of sword cultivators, only 4 or 5 of them were killed by Li Zongbao alone. In the end, he was besieged by 3 6th grade swordsmen. If it wasn't for Xiao Mao's help, risking his life to surprise and kill 1 swordsman, how could he have taken advantage of the chaos to kill 2 swordsmen? Xiao Mao also suffered some internal injuries because of this. He had a private discussion with him and asked him to challenge the swordsmen while Xiao Mao secretly killed them. Normally, Li Zongbao would have rejected without hesitation. He had no intention of cooperating with Xiao Mao, who was only in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. But today, he could only nod his head. So much so that he understood in his heart that Xiao Mao was actually taking care of him. However, he did not see anyone coming from the karst cave. Li Zongbao turned his head sadly. At this moment, a voice floated down from above his head. Huh, Senior Brother Li, you dropped something? Bullshit, you're the one who dropped something. Li Zongbao's eyes burned, and he scolded in an extremely rare manner. Xiao Hua's figure in front of him fell down along with his voice. Hee hee. Xiao Hua smiled faintly and gestured towards the place where Xiao Mao was hiding. Come here, big brother. Xiao Mao cried out in pleasant surprise. He appeared from the side of a stalactite and was about to rush over. Careful, Li Zongbao said anxiously. At this moment, not far from Xiao Mao, a third-grade swordsman had just killed a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator and was looking for an opponent. Seeing Xiao Mao appear, he pointed his finger without hesitation. A stream of light pierced towards Xiao Mao's back at lightning speed. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered. That swordsman cried out, covered his head with both hands, and fell to the ground. Xiao Mao naturally dodged the flying sword very easily and killed that swordsman. Then, he naturally picked up the storage bag and flew over. Oh, Senior Brotherly, what happened to you? Xiao Hua suddenly turned his head and glanced at Li Zongbao, whose expression was not right. No, nothing. Li Zongbao's face gradually turned cold. Just now, there was some backlash from my mental cultivation method. Xiao Hua's heart trembled, and he did not dare to ask more. Big brother, why did you only come now? Xiao Mao did not suffer any backlash from his mental cultivation method and asked happily, this is already fast enough. Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Do you know how far 7 Extremes Ridge is from here? I don't know. Xiao Mao answered honestly. How's 7 Extremes Ridge? Li Zongbao's tone was already indifferent. How's your Imperial Thunder Sect situation? I haven't arrived yet, but I heard that a Golden Core Master went over and killed a third-grade illusory sword cultivator from 7 Extremes Ridge. The sword cultivators of 7 Extremes Ridge have all retreated from 7 Extremes Ridge, Xiao Hua said with a smile. So it's like that. Li Zongbao nodded slightly. Where are the Golden Core Masters? Xiao Hua looked and asked. Xiao Mao saw that Li Zongbao's expression was not right and hurriedly replied, Martial Uncle Chu Hui from Utmost Happiness Faction, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu from Changbai Sect, and Senior Su Bo from Cool Breeze Valley. They entered to kill the illusory sword cultivator. And so, there are no Golden Core cultivators in this karst cave? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Xiao Mao nodded habitually and was very puzzled. Yes, good. Xiao Hua pointed at the entrance of the karst cave and said, Brotherly, Xiao Mao, take out your weapons and fly side by side in front of I. If you see any swordsmen, kill them all. How about it? This. Okay. Xiao Mao was quite puzzled, but he still nodded. Okay. Li Zongbao said concisely. Let's go. Xiao Hua waved the sun leaf fan in his hand lightly, and a hot aura reverberated around the two of them. Li Zongbao turned around and flew towards the entrance of the karst cave. Although Xiao Mao was puzzled, he did not dare to be negligent. He flew to Li Zongbao's side, stretched out his hand, and took out his magic whip. After flying for a few feet, he encountered a 4th-grade swordsman who was fighting with a Foundation establishment cultivator. The swordsman was like the swordsman just now. He suddenly covered his head with both hands, as if his head was hit by a flying sword. That Foundation establishment cultivator, I was still stunned at the side. Li Zongbao mercilessly lashed out with his whip and immediately broke the swordsman's forehead. Immediately after, Li Zongbao did not even look and flew forward. Senior Brotherly, the storage bag. Xiao Hua cried out from behind. That Foundation establishment cultivator was a disciple of Utmost Happiness Faction. Seeing that Senior Brotherly Zongbao was so powerful and helped him out of danger, he hurriedly shouted, Thank you, Senior Brother Zongbao. -8. Chapter 25:16. After expressing his gratitude, the apprentice of the Utopia faction flew to the swordsman and took his storage bag. Then, he took out his own elixir and swallowed it. Then, he stood in the air and adjusted his breath slightly. Seeing that the disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction took the storage bag, Xiao Hua curled his lips and raised his eyebrows somewhat helplessly. He muttered, Although a fly is small, it's still meat. The second opponent of Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao's group of 3 was a 6th-grade swordsman who had just killed another cultivator. Seeing the three of them flying over, he laughed nastily and was about to activate his flying sword. At the same time, the swordsman felt a stinging pain in his head. However, the swordsman suddenly came to his senses and immediately activated his secret technique to resist Xiao Hua's soul stab. Go to hell. Xiao Hua activated his yang leaf fan and a fire dragon rushed over, wanting to surround the swordsman. The swordsman naturally wouldn't allow himself to be captured without a fight. He activated his sword light and rushed toward the fire dragon. However, Xiao Hua's fire dragon was too powerful. The fire passed through the sword light and almost burned the swordsman's body. The swordsman was alarmed and was about to activate his sword energy to extinguish the fire again when he saw a piercing immortal whip and a magic whip attacking from the left and right at the same time. The swordsman only had time to block the piercing immortal whip before the magic whip pierced his throat. When the swordsman fell in midair, Xiao Mao very nimbly rushed over and grabbed the storage bag in one hand. Then, with a wave of his hand, the flying sword that fell in midair also flew up. Ha ha ha. As expected of the surname Xiao, Xiao Hua laughed loudly. The actions of Xiao Hua and the other two were immediately seen by several swordsmen. They looked at each other and activated their magic weapons together to fly toward the three of them. The swordsmen were all 5th grade and 6th grade swords. Their flying swords were extremely sharp and the sword light was also of various colors and shapes. Some condensed into thin thorns, some condensed into raindrops. There was even a swordsman whose flying sword turned into the thickness of a pillar and stabbed toward the three of them from several directions. Li Zongbao took a deep breath as usual and was about to wave the piercing immortal whip again. At this time, Xiao Hua laughed in his ear and said, "Senior brother Li, don't be anxious." Immediately, Xiao Hua raised his hand and several inconspicuous yellow talismans flew out. "Big brother, are you sure?" Even though Xiao Mao had great trust in Xiao Hua, when he saw that Xiao Hua actually used a yellow talisman to defend against the enemy, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. However, seeing the numerous yellow talismans gradually transform into a ball of fire, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of several hundred feet actually surged into the ball of fire like a hurricane, and an indescribably terrifying aura was emitted from the ball of fire. Not to mention Xiao Mao, even the swordsmen were greatly shocked. Fortunately, one of the swordsmen came to his senses quickly and shouted, "Let's go." As he spoke, he was about to activate the flying sword that had already pierced into the fireball in preparation to escape. Rumble. No one had ever seen such a huge fireball talisman before. Like a blazing sun, it exploded beside several swordsmen. An incomparably hot flame rushed towards Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, and the two of them were pushed back more than 10 feet by this flame. After the flame subsided, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at the place where they were just now. The previously arrogant flying swords had already been blown away, even if they were scattered in the distant stone wall. At this time, they could see that the quality of each flying sword was different. Some had many cracks, some had no brilliance, and the most miserable one had already been broken in two. Looking at the several valiant and high-spirited swordsmen, they were now blown to a corner of the karst cave. The sword light on their bodies was slightly swaying, and their faces were pale from the lingering fear and the serious injuries of their primordial spirits. "Kill!" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao shouted in unison, and each of them flew towards a swordsman. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took advantage of the eruption of fire spiritual energy from the fire talisman. A fire dragon rushed towards a cultivator, and he himself rushed towards another injured cultivator with the wishful steel staff in his hand. The sound of these fire talismans hidden under the yellow talismans was really loud. The residual sound of the explosion was like thunder rolling in the karst cave. The swordsmen and cultivators in the karst cave couldn't ignore it even if they didn't want to. When they saw Li Zongbao whipping a 5th grade swordsman until his skin and flesh split open, Xiao Mao throwing the universe ring and smashing a 6th grade swordsman's brain, and that thin and tall Xiao Hua, who they had never seen before, smashing a 5th grade swordsman's chest with his club. Furthermore, beside these three swordsmen, there was another swordsman who was screaming from being burned. No matter how hard they tried, The sword light on his body was unable to block the bone-like flames. How could they not be astonished? The cultivators of the Utopia faction, Taibai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley were all in high spirits, and many sword cultivators were extremely angry. They all wanted to get away and kill these three extremely cruel cultivators. Of course, they each had their own opponents, and only the swordsmen near Xiaohua and the others could be mobilized to besiege them. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao didn't have the slightest ripple on their faces when they saw close to 10 swordsmen surrounding them. Xiaohua's methods were really too many, not to mention other things. Just this fire talisman alone was the first time they'd seen it, and its power was so great. So what if a few more came? Unfortunately, the fire talisman was Xiaohua's secret item. He took out a few just now just to test its power. There were so many cultivators and swordsmen here. If Xiaohua used too many, he would definitely be exposed. So Xiaohua, who was hiding behind Li Zongbao, took out the soul-absorbing bell again. With a loud clang, only 2 of the 10 swordsmen swayed. They tried their best to resist for a moment, but they still fell from midair. The remaining 8 swordsmen's sword light flickered faintly. Although each of them had astonishment on their faces, they all resisted the soul-absorbing bell's soul-absorbing technique. Damn it, this thing is getting more and more useless. Xiaohua was very helpless. He put the soul-absorbing bell and the toad into his space. With a touch of his hand, he took out the young leaf fan. The 8 swordsmen urged their sword light, but they were somewhat hesitant. After all, their opponent actually had a soul tool. They had experience fighting soul cultivators, and they were afraid that Xiaohua would have some soul technique that they couldn't guard against, or some inexplicable fire talisman like before. Seeing this, Xiaohua was delighted. He hurriedly transmitted a few words to Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao nodded expressionlessly. The immortal piercing whip in his hand shone with a yellow brilliance, and a row of whip shadows smashed towards the 3 swordsmen in front of him. Xiao Mao was somewhat hesitant, but he still obediently urged the universe ring in midair to trap the 2 swordsmen in front of him. Xiaohua's figure swayed, and he actually rushed to the front for the first time. With a wave of his left hand, he still used the universe ring in the sleeve, and the yang leaf fan in his right hand flashed again, courting death. The 2 swordsmen in front of Xiaohua were 6th-grade swordsmen. Seeing Xiaohua recklessly challenge them first, they both sneered. One of their sword light flashed, and in a flash, it split into 3 and stabbed towards Xiaohua in a shape. The other swordsman's figure flew up, and both of his legs kicked out. Sword light actually burst out from this swordsman's legs, setting off a whirlwind that rushed towards Xiaohua's fire dragon. Seeing the 3 sword lights fall into Xiaohua's sleeve, the swordsman only laughed nastily. Explode. The 3 sword lights collided with each other, and like fireworks in the sky, countless tiny sword lights streaked across the sky, blooming like dandelions. In the eyes of that swordsman, he seemed to have seen the sword lights pass through Xiaohua's arm, pass through his Taoist robe, and even pass through his body. However, reality was always crueler than fantasy. He saw Xiaohua's Taoist robe cover, and a powerful force was born, enveloping an area of a few feet. An inexplicable imprisoning force came from the space, and in an instant, that swordsman lost contact with his flying sword. That swordsman's face turned ashen. Although he didn't know why this imprisoning force was so strong, he had an intuition in his heart that this imprisoning force seemed to be different from the ordinary ones. Seeing Xiaohua wave his arm and easily catch the flying sword that he was so proud of, as if he was pinching a firefly, the swordsman's figure didn't hesitate. He immediately turned around and fled, wanting to escape as far as he could before his primordial spirit was damaged. Xiaohua saw that this swordsman was actually so decisive and was also slightly surprised. This kind of swordsman who could pick up and let go was rarely seen before. Which one of them didn't stubbornly pester and hope for a fluke? In the next moment, Xiaohua didn't crush any sword light and directly put it into the space. What kind of flying sword could be exchanged for how many spirit stones? Xiaohua probably knew better than anyone else. He wasn't willing to waste it. Of Xiaohua's 2 opponents, one ran away as soon as they met face to face. The other one wanted to run, but he was relatively unlucky and was trapped by Xiaohua's yang leaf fan. that fire dragon not only entangled his flying sword, but also turned into a wall of fire that surrounded him all around. The hot flames on the fire dragon gradually swallowed the sword light, causing him to constantly urge his sword origin to resist. Seeing Xiao Hua turn his head to look at him, that swordsman's heart was hoodwinked, and he actually somewhat trembled. Who would have thought that Xiao Hua only glanced at him, and his figure suddenly flew to the side. The yang leaf fan in his hand disappeared, and a pitch-black stick appeared. He raised his head and struck at one of Xiao Mao's opponents. Although Xiao Hua's wind escape technique was only at the elementary level, it was extremely flexible in this karst cave. In the blink of an eye, he floated to the side of the swordsman. The swordsman was urging his sword light to deal with Xiao Mao, and was quite caught off guard. He couldn't help but be surprised. He opened his mouth, and his small life source sword drew a sword mark, stabbing towards Xiao Hua's face. The sharp sound of the wind on the tip of the sword seemed to cut the air. However, when the head of the wishful steel staff strangely fell and hit the small sword with great precision, the strength of the wishful steel staff was like the tongue of a poisonous snake, causing the swordsman's heart to tremble. He couldn't care less about the flying sword that was stabbing towards Xiao Mao, and hurriedly urged his small life source sword. Of course, he was also too late. Although the small sword was as flexible as a fish, and although the small sword was made of extraordinary materials, the wishful steel staff was a fish hook, and the wishful steel staff was a divine thunder falling from the sky. With a pa sound, it hit the small sword. With a crisp kacha sound, the defensive sword light on the small sword was immediately annihilated with the arrival of the wishful steel staff, and the small sword was smashed into pieces. Looking at the swordsman again, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body trembled violently, and his face was pale. His eyes were filled with the incomprehension and fear that all swordsmen who encountered Xiao Hua had. Then, the shadow of the black stick flashed, and the swordsman didn't know anything. -9. Chapter 25:17. After killing the second swordsman, Xiao Hua took his storage bag and flying sword and roared, "Give me your life." The wishful steel staff smashed towards the swordsman who was fighting with Xiao Mao. The swordsman had seen Xiao Hua's power and was already frightened. Seeing Xiao Hua attack him again, he hurriedly urged his flying sword to block Xiao Hua, who knew that Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff had only hit a few feet in front of him. Once again, it strangely floated and rushed towards the swordsman who had just escaped from his fire wall. Help! The swordsman had just escaped from the fire wall and was rejoicing. When he saw Xiao Hua rushing towards him like a demon, he couldn't help but shout. Although he shouted and tried his best to urge his flying sword, the flying sword was somewhat vulnerable under Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. Kacha! The flying sword was broken, followed by a poof. The swordsman's head was also broken. Following the fall of the swordsman's corpse, the swordsman that Xiao Hua had just let go also fell from mid-air. The swordsman had urged all the sword energy in his body to meet Xiao Hua's staff, who knew that Xiao Hua would leave without any symptoms. The swordsman was stunned and didn't withdraw his flying sword in time, or rather, he didn't have any intention of withdrawing. But his opponent, Xiao Mao, was not stunned. The heaven and earth ring was used in time, taking advantage of Xiao Hua's feint to trap the swordsman. At this point, Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao had completed their task. As for Li Zongbao, facing two swordsmen of the 5th level, although it consumed his magical power, it was not a problem. Then, Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao were still in front, and Xiao Hua was behind. The three of them steadily advanced. Most of the swordsmen behind them were about the 4th level. Under Xiao Hua's soul stab, the swordsmen were repeatedly hit. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao easily took their lives. As for the small number of swordsmen who were not afraid of Xiao Hua's soul stab, they also became ghosts under Xiao Hua's staff. Of course, except for Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao, the other disciples of the Utopia faction, Taibai faction, and Cool Breeze Valley did not know that it was Xiao Hua's soul stab. But when they saw Li Zongbao flying at the front, they all cheered and shouted, "Senior Brother Li is good." Even a few disciples of the Utopia faction who had escaped from the fight also lined up beside Li Zongbao and joined the three of them in killing the sword cultivators. When the three of them arrived at the entrance of the karst cave, there were no surviving swordsmen in this area. There were over 100 cultivators surrounding them. Seeing the entrance of the karst cave, some of the disciples couldn't help but look in the direction of life. Their eyes flashed with hesitation. That's right, they didn't have a chance before. But now that they were faced with a choice, they couldn't help but weigh the pros and cons in their hearts. When Xiaohua saw this, he sneered in his heart. Just now, he had just casually pointed his finger and didn't think too much about it. Who knew that when things came to a head, he actually discovered that his finger really did have a mystery. Li Zongbao also noticed this. He raised the celestial destroying whip in his hand and said coldly, "I'm going to fight my way in. Anyone who still thinks he is a disciple of the Utopia faction and wants to be a disciple of the Utopia faction should follow me into the Utopia faction. After this battle, all of you will be meritorious. I don't need to say anything. Even when you return to the Utopia faction, you can enjoy the rewards with peace of mind. Naturally, anyone who doesn't want to be a disciple of the Utopia faction can leave now. I won't force you." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Zongbao took the lead and rushed towards the swordsmen who were beginning to gather in the distance. "Kill! We are all cultivators of the Dao faction. Follow Senior Li Zongbao and kill the enemy." Xiao Mao took the opportunity to shout as well. He held the whip in one hand and the heaven and earth ring in the other as he stood side by side with Li Zongbao. Naturally, Xiaohua didn't say anything and quietly followed behind them. "Kill! I'm familiar with Senior Li Zongbao. Even if I die here today, I can't explain to Master. If I run away, I can't bear to part with my junior sisters of the Utopia faction." A short, wretched old man with triangular eyes and a goatee chuckled. He pounced forward and held up a magic weapon that looked like a pipe in his hand. "Not bad, not bad." Another tall, middle-aged male cultivator clapped his hand, and a sparkling flying sword appeared in his hand. He smiled and said, "My dual cultivation partner is still waiting for my news in the Changbai sect. If she hears that I'm a deserter, what will she think? This Shua would rather die here and break her heart than let her look down on this Shua. Let's go, let's go. I also want to compete with the swordsmen in terms of flying swords." An old male cultivator held a black iron sword in his eagle claw-like hand. He actually called himself Young Master and chased after them. Immediately, nearly 40 cultivators followed Li Zongbao and the other two and charged into the battlefield again. They charged towards the front where blood and death were intertwined. The other 60 disciples were mostly disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and the Changbai sect. They hesitated for a moment and looked at each other. Another 40 disciples waved their hands and charged in bravely. They caught up with Li Zongbao and the others and looked at the last 20 disciples. Their eyes were full of unwillingness. At this moment, a Cool Breeze Valley cultivator with a face as white as jade whispered, "Do you all remember the purpose of coming to the Flowing Ice Valley this time?" When the other disciples heard this, their faces were filled with ecstasy. A female cultivator with a large scar on her forehead said hurriedly, "Yes, yes, we came to the Flowing Ice Valley to spy on the strength of the swordsmen. We didn't have to attack the Flowing Ice Valley." "Li Zongbao is not part of our team this time," the white-faced cultivator said coldly. "His cultivation is high and he can freely enter and exit the Flowing Ice Valley, but we can't. Moreover, he is fond of grandiose achievements. In order to become the strongest person below the Golden Core stage, he likes to kill sword cultivators. His purpose is different from ours today." Yes, Li Zongbao doesn't know the purpose of this place at all. He only joined later. The female cultivator said hurriedly, "We will return to the Sky Patrol City and report the strength of the sword cultivators in the Flowing Ice Valley to the conference hall. Then, we will have completed this mission. In addition, we can find other helpers on the way. Let's go." Before the female cultivator finished speaking, another male cultivator suddenly flew out of the karst cave and said coldly, "I'm here to contribute to my Dao sect, not to sacrifice my life for Li Zongbao's reputation. I only listen to the orders of the conference hall. Li Zongbao is not our leader. I have no reason to listen to him." Then, The 20 people did not say anything else and flew away with a clear conscience. Of course, whether they could fly out of the flowing ice valley, whether they could fly back to the Sky Patrol City, and whether they could complete their mission as they said, no one would know. Xiaohua did not pay attention to this place at all. Everyone had their own fate, and each person had their own choice. Just like the Cool Breeze Valley cultivator he met earlier, Xiaohua did not care at all. His attention was now on the swordsman in front of him. There were many swordsmen in the karst cave. There were definitely more than 10,000 of them. Xiaohua and the other two were like a drop in the ocean. Even with the dozens of people who came with them, they were far from being a threat to them. What Xiaohua wanted to do was to kill the enemies as soon as possible and instill fear in the hearts of these swordsmen. Just like his fierce reputation of the terrifying phoenix, the swordsman would retreat without a fight. In just a few breaths, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao encountered swordsmen in front of them. Just like before, Xiaohua secretly attacked. After the sneak attack was successful, Li Zongbao would attack. If they encountered a difficult opponent, Li Zongbao would activate his magic power, or Xiaohua would attack forcefully. Xiao Mao's magic power was slightly weaker, so he only dealt with opponents that he was confident in. The outstanding performance of these three people naturally made the dozens of people who followed them excited. They also lined up behind the three of them, forming a sharp knife shape, and stabbed towards the tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators who were entangled. Xiaohua hid behind Li Zongbao. Seeing that the morale of the crowd was high, he was also happy. When he saw other cultivators fighting against the swordsmen, he also used the soul stab from time to time. Most of the time, it was successful. However, these cultivators did not know that it was Xiaohua's credit. They all cast grateful gazes towards Li Zongbao. Gradually, more and more cultivators and swordsmen noticed the situation on this side. Almost all the places where Xiaohua and the others passed by, the swordsmen were killed by them together, and the cultivators also merged into their torrent. Just like the river water of flowing ice valley, Xiaohua and the others were the drop of snow water of Shuiyu Mountain. Gradually, as they flowed through the ice field, more and more snow water mixed in, and this snow water became more and more, and also became a trickling stream. And the drop of snow water in front of this stream was incomparably hot, incomparably red, and all the coldness and ice layers could not block its sharpness. All the ice turned into flowing water under its magic power. Therefore, this stream became even bigger, and many little drops made an ocean, and it actually became a torrent. Of course, Xiaohua was enduring silently. Of course, Xiao Mao's cultivation was relatively shallow. Of course, Li Zongbao's glory was unparalleled for a time. However, at this time, no one would treat Li Zongbao as a person, and no one would ignore Xiaohua and Xiao Mao. This was because the three of them were a small team, and Xiaohua and Xiao Mao had been fighting together from beginning to end. At this time, Li Zongbao was not alone, but three people. Perhaps in the past, Li Zongbao claimed to be the #1 gold core cultivator, but from today onwards, after this battle in Flowing Ice Valley, the title of the special team of the conference hall would replace Li Zongbao's previous reputation. Kill, Li Zongbao roared, and the immortal piercing whip lashed out again. Although it didn't bring about too many whip shadows, he didn't seem to be worried about the might of the immortal piercing whip. With a loud bang, the whip shadow collided with the huge sword light, and this sword light was like a mountain. Boom! Immediately after, another fiery light flashed by, and Xiaohua's Yang Leaf fan rushed forward. The fiery light covered the sword light that was missing a piece from the immortal piercing whip and crazily swallowed it. Wu, Xiaohua's fiery light had just stopped for a moment, and Xiao Mao's universe ring flew over again and fell down smoothly. The sawtooth inside the ring made a strange sound, and the huge sword light was ground into pieces. -9. Chapter 25:18. Behind the three of them, a Taibai sect disciple raised his flying sword. With a flash of sword light, the yellow flying sword was smashed into pieces. The flying sword of a 6th stage swordsman was destroyed by three people. Naturally, because of the appearance of Xiaohua, Xiao Mao, and Li Zongbao, the cultivators of the Taoist sect were once again united. Of course, the sword cultivator also joined forces. The destruction of the flying sword of the sixth stage swordsman was only a small part of the confrontation between the swordsmen and the cultivators. However, this small part also represented the current situation of the battle. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had gradually gained the upper hand. Compared to the cultivators, these swordsmen seemed to know more about the techniques of war. Seeing that the situation had changed, the dozens of disciples of the Void Heaven Sword School had already tacitly occupied the advantageous terrain. Each of them urged their fellow swordsmen to hold their flying swords in their hands. When the cultivators led by Li Zongbao arrived in front of them, everyone shouted in unison. Dozens of flying swords flew out and condensed into a huge flying sword. Disciples! Li Zongbao also shouted, urging the disciples to meet the battle. The swordsmen had been preparing for a long time. At this time, they attacked to catch the cultivators off guard. The disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction were obviously not as well trained as the swordsmen, so how could they make it in time? Senior brother Li, junior brother Xiao, help me. Seeing this, Xiao Hua immediately shouted and flew out, waving the wishful steel staff to meet the huge flying sword. The cultivators of the Taoist sect had finally gained the upper hand. If they couldn't block this sword, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Help you? When Li Zongbao heard this and saw Xiao Hua take the initiative to fly out, he was bewildered. He really didn't know how to help Xiao Hua. However, he had always known Xiao Hua's ability and boldly guessed that the culprit who killed Tu Hong was Xiao Hua. He felt that Xiao Hua would be able to block the joint attack of dozens of swordsmen. Xiao Hua's shout was just a cover. Okay. Li Zongbao hurriedly flew up and hurriedly gave Xiao Mao a look. Xiao Mao also hurriedly flew up. The two of them had the same idea and the same action. One of them urged the magic weapon to attack the flying sword, while the other patted Xiao Hua's direction. From the looks of it, they were using some kind of joint attack secret technique that no one knew about. Sure enough, as the two of them raised their arms, Xiao Hua's entire body was enveloped in flames that soared into the sky. The flames were extremely dazzling. Not only did it block everyone's gazes, it also greatly disturbed their divine senses. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. Xiao Hua's wishful staff hit the huge flying sword. Even though Xiao Hua let out a strange cry of ouch, and his entire figure flew back like a flying sword, charging straight into the distance, the combined attack of several tens of shining swordsmen had actually been mostly dissipated by him. The sound was the sound of the collision between the wishful steel staff and the flying sword. The sound was almost earth-shattering, shaking the entire cave. Furthermore, the huge shockwave before the collision had stirred up the heaven and earth spiritual chi in an incomparably chaotic manner. It spread through the entire space in all directions. Not only were countless stones falling from the special stone walls of the karst cave, but the deafening sound also made all the cultivators and swordsmen dizzy. These three people are too powerful. Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao's magic weapons collided with the huge flying sword. Naturally, they were not its opponent, and their figures flew back along with Xiao Hua. Everyone looked at the three people who were knocked back, and then looked at the sword shadow that had almost dissipated. They all gasped, especially the swordsmen. They knew the power of their joint attack of the flying sword. Without the strength of a second-grade illusory sword, it was impossible to do it. Kill. While the cultivators were shocked, the disciples of the Utopia faction were also ready. Dozens of disciples who were also closest to Li Zongbao urged their magic weapons at the same time, and together, they smashed into the flying sword. Buzz, 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 there was a burst of golden sounds, and the remaining flying swords were forced to fly back by the joint attack of the disciples of the Utopia faction. Many of the flying swords were even broken. Attack! Seeing that they had obtained victory, the other disciples also roared, and one after another, they took out their magic weapons and magic weapons. With a rainbow-like momentum, they rushed toward the swordsmen who were somewhat flustered with a tide-like attack. Just as mentioned before, the situation on the battlefield was too delicate. Xiao Hua's attack seemed to have scattered the swordsmen's last stubborn defense, their last persistence, and their last pride. At the same time, it also sounded the horn of victory for the cultivators. If these experienced swordsmen organized a few more times, they might be able to turn the situation around. However, when they saw the cultivators launch another attack, they chose to be defeated after panicking. Of course, it was also because these swordsmen had battle experience that they knew that the situation was hopeless, and so they fled. A defeated army was like a landslide. This was exactly the case. Not to mention third-grade swordsmen. Even sixth-grade swordsmen would hastily step on their flying swords and flee. Fortunately, there were a lot of stalactites in this karst cave space, and there were even more karst caves of various sizes. The flying speed of the swordsmen was also extremely fast. Although they were chased by the cultivators from behind, the swordsmen still maintained a straight posture. Damn it, why isn't anyone helping me? Where did all those junior sisters go? Xiao Hua shook off the water droplets on his body and stood up from under a stalactite. His gaze looked at the utmost happiness faction and Tai by faction disciples who were chasing further and further away, and he shouted angrily. He was truly sent flying by the swordsman's flying swords, and his back crashed into who knows how many stalactites. Heh, how about little brother help you? Xiao Mao's voice sounded not far away. He and Li Zongbao merely borrowed the momentum to fly backwards. How could they compare to Xiao Hua? Even if they crashed into the stalactites, that was also an act. Tisk, forget it. Do you have jade hands again? Xiao Hua clapped his hands, took out a few jade bottles, and threw them to Xiao Mao. You'd better hurry up and take these pills. The magic power in your body has long dried up, right? Heh, little brother can't compare to big brother. Xiao Mao took a few pills without hesitation and handed the jade bottle to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao still had a cold face. He took the bottle, sniffed it with his nose, frowned slightly, and then looked at it a few times, poured out a pill and swallowed it into his stomach. Then his eyebrows slightly relaxed, and he looked at Xiao Hua even more thoughtfully. After taking the pill, Xiao Mao whispered, "Big brother, the senior brothers of the utmost happiness faction have already flown far away. Should we hurry over? Damn it, if you want to go, you go." Xiao Hua waved his hand. How much magic power do you have to consume? Anyway, I don't dare to go. Xiao Mao seemed to wake up from a dream and said with a smile, "Yes, little brother understands. You have to do things in moderation. Too much is as bad as not enough. If we can show off our invincible power again, big brother, I'm afraid it'll be hard to explain." What's hard for me to explain? Xiao Hua curled his lips. Heh, big brother, after this battle, your name will be known throughout the entire Sky Patrol city. Xiao Mao gave a thumbs up. That shocking strike just now. It's really powerful. That's dozens of bright swordsmen. Alas. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face immediately became long, and he looked at Li Zongbao, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Senior brother Li, this is all thanks to you. Your secret joint attack is really powerful. I'm just a brute force, and I only borrowed the magic power of senior brother Xiao Mao and junior brother Xiao Mao. This strike doesn't deserve any credit from me. It's all thanks to senior brother Li. Yes, Li Zongbao's expression didn't change, and he nodded slightly. What credit do you have? It's all mine. It's me who brought you to Flowing Ice Valley, and it's me who taught you the secret joint attack. Furthermore, the attack just now was also the result of my magic power transforming into physical strength. Great. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, "In this world, only senior brotherly knows my heart." However, even if I admit it like this, in the eyes of some people, there are still some problems. Li Zongbao reminded Xiao Hua with a rare flash of worry in his eyes. Alas, I know. Xiao Hua looked up at the crowd that had already disappeared and sighed. But if I don't do it, senior brother Li will be the first to disagree. I won't disagree. Li Zongbao shook his head. I will only fight to the death. Not only will I disagree, even big brother won't agree. Xiao Mao said with a grin. He was in an extremely good mood. His cultivation was the weakest among the three of them, and it had always been Xiao Hua who took care of him. Today, he and Li Zongbao had cooperated extremely well. Not to mention killing countless sword cultivators. Even that last wave of their hands at the same time seemed to be telepathic. They had really helped Xiao Hua a great deal. Moreover, the three of them had limitless glory today, and 30% of it was his, Xiao Mao's, share. In the entire Xuanyan school, there probably weren't many who could catch up to him, right? Let's go. We'll go see Martial Uncle Xiaohui and the others. Li Zongbao said with a wave of his hand. Senior brother Li, are you sure? Xiaohua hurriedly advised. That's a battle between golden core cultivators. Can you afford to get involved? I can't afford to get involved, but someone else can. Li Zongbao said coldly. Martial Uncle Xiaohui is my martial uncle, and also the main instigator of the Feather Immortal Gathering. He's been good to me, so I can't not help him. Damn it, I knew it. That day you came to the Utopia faction in a hurry, so that's why. Xiaohua said helplessly as he flew up. At that time, I didn't know you were Martial Uncle Xiaohui, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to go to the 7 Extremes Mountains. Li Zongbao retorted. Forget it. What else could Xiaohua say? Li Zongbao had already said so much, and he was almost dragging Xiaohua along. But, Senior Brother Li, Xiaohua still exhorted, my magic power is now exhausted, and I still have to rely on Senior Brother's secret technique, and I still have to rely on Senior Brother and Junior Brother Zhao's help. I know. Li Zongbao was a little impatient. Every time I see your magic power exhausted, and every time I see you recover the fastest, don't worry, the cultivators of the Utopia faction are all responsible, and we won't forget our righteousness at the sight of profit. Hearing Li Zongbao say responsible, Xiaohua's expression became a little gloomy. Obviously, he was mocking the irresponsible Qianmo of the Imperial Thunder Sect, who only treated the Imperial Thunder Sect as a big sect, who only showed the style of a big sect, but didn't have the strength of a big sect. -9. Chapter 25:19. Xiao Mao also looked at Xiaohua sympathetically. He wasn't a famous disciple in the Xuanyan school, but in the meeting hall, he was protected by Gao Wei. But Xiaohua, cough, cough, Li Zongbao suddenly said in a low voice, actually, the Utopia faction values the disciples of other sects very much. His voice was very soft and even a little hesitant. Xiaohua heard it and felt warm in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but laugh. Needless to say, Li Zongbao's master, De Sun, wanted Li Zongbao to say these words to Xiaohua. Li Zongbao had obviously guessed that he was the culprit behind Tu Hong's death, but he still said these words. However, this sentence was quite rebellious. Li Zongbao couldn't say it clearly, so Xiaohua just pretended that he didn't hear it. There were many caves in the karst cave space, and the directions were also very complicated. Xiaohua's divine thought and Buddhist sense couldn't go very far. In such a place, he was already confused. But Li Zongbao was much stronger than Xiaohua. With just a glance and a slight sniff, he quickly found a path that was different from many cultivators chasing after the swordsman. Seeing that there were no bloodstains or corpses on the path, Xiaohua was a little surprised. He couldn't help but ask in a low voice, Senior Brother Li, how did you know? Tu Hui's whereabouts? Is it some kind of secret art of the Utopia faction? Xiaohua was sincerely asking for advice. After all, he was too weak in this aspect. If Li Zongbao really had some kind of secret art, maybe he would be thick-skinned and ask for advice. Who knew that Li Zongbao's words would make him stunned? Nothing else, just intuition. Well, Xiaohua shrugged helplessly. He knew that Li Zongbao was telling the truth. It seemed that Cui Hongshan had some strong points in this aspect. Li Zongbao had been flying for more than half an hour. Seeing that there were 2 forks in the road, Li Zongbao began to hesitate. But at this moment, a deep and obvious rumbling sound came from the cave on the left. Li Zongbao was stunned. Boom. Quick. Li Zongbao heard the sound and was anxious. He held the fairy whip in his hand and rushed to the cave on the left. When Xiaohua saw this, he did not dare to be negligent. He urged the wind escape technique and instantly overtook Xiao Mao. He followed behind Li Zongbao while holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. After flying for another half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua's keen senses picked up on the minute changes in the heaven and earth spiritual qi. The dense water-type heaven and earth spirit qi became increasingly overwhelming, and the faint restriction within the cave also emitted a faint blue light. Oh, the spirit stones produced by Flowing Ice Valley are water-based? Xiao Hua's brows twitched as he came to a realization. In his mind, the scene of rows and rows of light blue water-type, top-grade spirit stones appeared. Damn it! Xiao Hua secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and shook his head with all his might, as if he wanted to shake this tempting scene out of his mind. Nonsense! The Spirit Stone Mine in Flowing Ice Valley had been occupied by sword cultivators for many days, and it was different from the Spirit Stone Mine in Gale Snowfield. How could there be so many spirit stones left here? Xiaohua wasn't just indulging in wishful thinking. Besides, with Li Zongbao following him, how could he have such an opportunity? What? Li Zongbao suddenly turned his head and looked at Xiaohua very strangely. Nothing. Xiaohua shrugged and was about to speak when the dense heaven and earth spirit chi suddenly flowed, as if there was a huge suction force in front of them. Li Zongbao obviously also sensed it. He did his best to urge his flying technique, and his figure sped up a bit. You can't be like this. Xiaohua's divine sense swept out, but unfortunately, it was still blocked by the cave. He muttered, and his figure couldn't help but slow down. When the three of them flew into another karst cave, they unconsciously stopped. They saw that this was a space that was only slightly smaller than the previous karst cave where they were fighting. Inside was a vortex of heaven and earth spirit chi from before. Countless hurricanes blew from all directions of the karst cave and poured into the center. In that space, two white-haired old men stood upright in mid-air. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out, and he felt that the protective brilliance around the two people were flashing with sword light. The sword light was incomparably sharp, as if it could cut through his divine sense. Changbai sect. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed, and he immediately knew that they were the Changbai sect disciples who came to attack Flowing Ice Valley together with Tu Hui from the Utopia sect. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect, Marshal Uncle Li. Li Zongbao stopped in midair and transmitted his voice. He is an extremely honest cultivator. Tisich, what does being honest have to do with me? Xiao Hua disdained. His enmity with the Changbai sect was huge. Not only did the Changbai sect's nascent soul cultivators want to kill him, but he also wanted to kill the Changbai sect's golden core cultivators. Facing such a sect's golden core cultivators, how could Xiao Hua attack? Hearing Xiao Hua's reaction, Li Zongbao was expressionless. At this moment, the two old men, who were as sharp as swords, moved. In front of one of the old men, a 10-feet-long flying sword vibrated violently. The runes on the flying sword flowed crazily, like countless tadpoles looking for their mother. And with the movement of these runes, thousands of tiny vortexes appeared on the 1-foot-wide sword. Not only did the vortexes emit tiny sword rays, but they also sucked in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the surrounding 10 feet. And as the spiritual chi of heaven and earth poured in, the blue brilliance on the flying sword became even brighter. This is Li Feiyu from the Changbai sect. Xiao Hua did not know much about the flying swords of the Taoist sect and sword cultivators. Seeing the flying sword being used like a magic weapon, he naturally recognized that this old man was Li Feiyu. Li Feiyu was facing a swordsman who looked very similar to him. Although he was wearing a sword outfit, which was very different from Li Feiyu's Changbai sect Taoist robe, who would notice the Taoist robe and sword outfit in the flashing sword light. Disdain appeared on the swordsman's face. He waved his hand, and a similar blue brilliance condensed in midair. In an instant, it also transformed into a 10-feet-long and 1-foot-wide flying sword. It was actually similar to Li Feiyu's flying sword. However, there were no runes flowing on this flying sword. The entire flying sword was a kind of azure blue. The sword rays were like flickering blue lights. They seemed to be stagnant in the flying sword, but they were flowing extremely quickly. Li Feiyu saw the other party's flying sword taking shape and narrowed his eyes. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Qin Mu Ming, eat my sword." As he spoke, the big sword followed Li Feiyu's wave and moved slowly in midair. Every time the big sword moved, there would be a rumbling sound, as if the big sword was breaking through the air. Li Feiyu, you and I have fought for so long and I am tired of it. Today, I will let you see the true essence of my sword cultivation. I will also let you know that imitating a cat to draw a tiger will never become a tiger. As he spoke, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword made a strange turn and flashed in mid-air. It gave out a terrifying sword hum and charged straight at Li Feiyu's big sword. If you compare them separately, the flying swords of sword cultivators and the flying swords of Changbai sect are really similar. Even Li Feiyu and Qin Mu Ming have the same temperament. But when these two flying swords meet, they are different. Yes, the essence is different. It was rare to see a Changbai sect disciple using a flying sword to fight a sword cultivator disciple. Xiao Hua's eyes lit up as he watched attentively. Li Feiyu's flying sword gave off a majestic aura. Wherever the sword light passed, it was like the wind blowing through rotten wood, sweeping away all the spirit energy of heaven and earth. On the other hand, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was filled with sword lights. That huge sword was made up of countless sword lights, and each sword light was a tiny flying sword. Although his flying sword didn't have the imposing aura of Li Feiyu's flying sword, not only was the flying sword extremely sharp, the sword light seemed to be able to cut open the void. Even the spirit of each sword light could be seen on the spirit of a sword cultivator. Not to mention that the sword will of Qin Mu Ming's flying sword was like the gurgling flowing water. This blue flying sword was like the river water of flowing ice valley. Even though it was extremely soft, it still had the unyielding will to split the towering valley apart. With a boom, the two flying swords pierced into one place. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and saw clearly that Li Feiyu's flying sword had an imposing aura. The moment it touched Qin Mu Ming's flying sword, it immediately shattered all the sword light on the flying sword. The entire flying sword that was formed by the sword light was struck and collapsed. Li Feiyu's flying sword seemed to have sunk deeply into the sword light. However, after a few breaths, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword showed extreme flexibility. The tenacious power of water was born from the sword light. Not only did it maintain the shape of the flying sword, it also slowly recovered one sword light after another. It supported Li Feiyu's flying sword, and then slowly retreated. And when the two flying swords reached a balance, Qin Mu Ming's flying sword suddenly emitted a brilliant brilliance. It was like a spirit snake that had awakened from hibernation and jumped. Like a big mouth, it quickly swallowed Li Feiyu's flying sword. Not only that, the small sword light that was formed by the flying sword ruthlessly pierced into Li Feiyu's flying sword from all angles. In just the blink of an eye, pieces of stains appeared on the flying sword. There was even a faint crack that appeared on the flying sword. Wong wong, the sound of the sword rang. Not only was Li Feiyu's sword light flashing, even Qin Mu Ming's sword light was flashing frequently. Seeing this, Li Feiyu's expression suddenly changed. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and his body flashed with rapid magic power fluctuations. The true essence in his golden core was instantly extracted and turned into magic power that surged into the flying sword. With a crisp GA sound, it seemed to be the sound of Li Feiyu's arm or the sound of a certain part of the flying sword. The flying sword suddenly stretched forward and a sword light rushed out from the flying sword. It actually tore a small hole in Qin Mu Ming's sword light and was about to pierce Qin Mu Ming's chest. Pooh, with a soft sound, Qin Mu Ming's left arm moved slightly and another sword light streaked across. It was neither fast nor slow and extremely accurate as it hit the sword light. It immediately shattered the sword light. -9. Chapter 25-20. Hiss, Xiao Hua took in a cold breath when he saw the situation. This Qin mumming can even give birth to sword light on his arm. It seems like he already has the feeling of transforming into a sword. Li Feiyu might not be his match. Just as this thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, he saw Qin Mu Ming laughing heartily. His empty hand clenched into a fist and smashed towards Li Feiyu. However, sword light also flickered on that fist as though this fist was the sword light itself. Li Feiyu was naturally not afraid of this. His other hand also formed a spell, and a blue shield light appeared in midair, blocking the front of the fist. With a crisp crack, the fist was really like a sword light stabbing into glass. That shield light transformed into flowing light and fell down. Just as Li Feiyu waved his hand and numerous shield lights appeared again. Suddenly, a pure blue sword light that was about the thickness of a thumb suddenly appeared from the flying sword that was swallowing Li Feiyu's sword light. It was the flying sword that had stabbed into Li Feiyu. Crack, crack, crack. It was actually similar to the sound of the shield light shattering. An extremely deep crack actually appeared on Li Feiyu's flying sword from this sword light. Ah? Pre-celestial heavy water. This flying sword of yours is refined by pre-celestial heavy water? Li Feiyu was astonished. This flying sword was his natal magic treasure, and he could acutely sense the abnormality of Qin Mumming's flying sword. At the same time, his primordial spirit was also damaged. Why would Qin Mumming answer him? That sword light rapidly shrank and pierced towards Li Feiyu's huge sword again. Whoosh! Brilliance flourished around Li Feiyu's body, and where his magic power surged, the huge sword was rapidly retracted. Furthermore, it was gradually shrinking. Just as that huge sword escaped from the range of Qin Mumming's sword light, Li Feiyu's figure flashed past and actually flew towards the other side of the karst cave. Behind him, a shield light that was several yards big suddenly appeared with a wave of his hand. Where are you running to? Qin Mu Ming had hit the enemy in one move and shouted out loudly. His body also slightly distorted as he chased after Li Feiyu like a wave. The shield light that Li Feiyu had struck out was instantly shattered by him, and it was only delayed by a flick of a finger. Although Li Feiyu wasn't fleeing in the direction of Xiao Hua's group, Qin Mumming's spiritual sense had long sensed their arrival. However, Qin Mumming only coldly swept his gaze over the three of them. His figure flashed several hundred feet in front of Xiao Hua's group. He didn't attack the 3 Dao sect disciples who were in the late Foundation establishment stage. Motherfucker, why don't you do it? Li Zongbao scolded angrily in his heart. When he saw Xiao Hua watching the battle with interest and not going up to help, he knew he didn't want to make a move. If Qin Mu made a move, Xiao Hua would definitely make a move, but Qin Mu didn't care. Although that was what Li Zongbao thought, he didn't dare to do it himself. When Qin Mumming's figure disappeared into the karst cave, Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Then, he took the lead and flew to the back where Qin Mumming and Li Feiyu were fighting. Big brother. Xiao Mao was behind Xiao Hua. When he saw Li Zongbao rushing inside without thinking, he couldn't help but worry. He transmitted his voice. That sword cultivator Qin Mumming is extremely powerful. I'm no match for him. Big brother, can you do it? Yes, it's not a big problem. Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and said, "What's wrong?" This Qin Mumming is also from the Void Heaven Sword School. He seems to be Qin Jian's junior. Xiao Mao said embarrassedly. I feel that the three of us actually have designs on Qin Jian. It's a little crazy. Yes, just the two of you is a dream. Xiao Hua said with a smile, with Big Brother. Ha ha ha, that dream might come true. Yes, I understand. However, Big Brother should be careful. This sword cultivator's attack power is too strong. Changbai sect's martial Uncle Li's flying sword is already powerful enough, but he still can't defeat Qin Mumming. Yes, Big Brother knows. You have to be careful too. Xiao Hua nodded. After this battle, you will become famous. This name must stay in the hands of the living. Yes. Xiao Mao's heart felt warm. He really didn't expect that the call of Big Brother from decades ago would change his fate. The fate in this world was too wonderful. Woo boom! A violent tremor shook the cave. A helpless and low voice faintly came from the distance. How dare you, Martial Uncle Chia Hui? Hurry! Li Zongbao heard and hurriedly urged. He also flew over. Okay. Xiao Hua saw that Li Zongbao was in a hurry and had already flown in front of him. After passing through several caves, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He saw that this was a blue space that was about a few li in size. There were fist-sized flashes on the stone walls. These flashes immediately attracted Xiao Hua's attention. Martial Uncle Chia Hui. Zongbao is here to help you. Li Zongbao followed Xiao Hua in. His gaze was different from Xiao Hua's. After sucking in a breath of cold air, he hurriedly shouted. In the center of this space, a giant wolf was emitting a threatening aura. It was holding a demonic weapon that looked like a halberd. It was pouncing towards a short and thin cultivator with gray hair. That cultivator was holding a magic weapon that looked like a horsetail whisk. That horsetail whisk had tens of thousands of threads that were flashing with a golden brilliance. Every thread seemed to be an extremely sharp sword. Woo! With a muffled sound, the giant wolf's halberd plunged into the light dust. The sharp horsetail whisk extended its antennae like a sea anemone and blocked the halberd. However, the demonic weapon's boundless strength suppressed the horsetail whisk. Not only did the horsetail whisk flicker, even Chu Hui's body was smashed down a few feet. However, below Chia Hui was another giant with an almost naked upper body. In his hand was a mace. This giant was actually a few times bigger than the one Xiaohua saw before. Even the mace was a few times bigger. This giant waved the mace and smashed it towards Chia Hui, who was falling down. Although there was still a distance of several zhang between them, the sound of the wind from the mace and the huge wave of qi rushed towards Chia Hui's legs. An unconcealable sense of crisis immediately made Chia Hui's body tremble. It was already difficult for the demonic weapon to block the giant wolf. This time, the brilliance of the horsetail whisk trembled again. Hearing Li Zongbao's voice, Chia Hui panicked. He didn't even have time to look at Li Zongbao. He tried his best to circulate his magic power. While his body was barely able to fly upwards, he shouted, "You rushed here. Quickly leave. This is not a place you can come." When Li Zongbao saw that Chia Hui was in danger, he panicked at first. However, when he looked carefully, his heart calmed down. He had seen a lot of how Xiaohua bullied others along the way. Moreover, he knew how powerful Xiaohua's wishful staff was. Dragging Xiaohua over was the wisest decision. "Junior brother Xiao, we will use our secret technique." Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua, whose gaze was already lingering on the top-grade water-type spirit stone, and urged him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Oh yes." Xiaohua reluctantly moved his gaze away from the spirit stone's brilliance. He swept his gaze and said with a smile, "Senior brotherly, if the three of us chase that giant away, we should be able to save Martial Uncle Chia Hui, right?" "Naturally, the three of us will chase the giant away." Li Zongbao emphasized the words, "the three of us," as if to make Xiaohua feel at ease. Come. Let this young master see who is stronger." Xiaohua waved the wishful staff in his hand. His body slowly flew up, and he shouted at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, "Senior brothers, help me." "All right." Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao waved their hands in extreme boredom. At the same time, they waved their left hand and waved it towards Xiaohua's back. In their right hand, the piercing immortal whip and the universe ring were also brought out. Each flashed brilliantly as they smashed towards the giant. Roar! When the giant saw that his mace was unable to hit Chia Hui, and that there were actually 3 little Foundation establishment stage insects coming over, he immediately looked up to the sky and roared. Dragging his mace, he took the initiative to rush towards Xiaohua and the others. At this time, under the secret technique of Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, Xiaohua waved his wishful staff and flew over. Woo! The giant's mace made a soul-stirring sound as it struck towards Xiaohua's wishful staff. That huge mace was almost the same size as Xiaohua. Although the mace had not yet approached, the suffocating sound of the wind was almost enough to send the tall and thin Xiaohua flying. Moreover, the strange sounds coming from the spiked club were also faintly shaking Xiaohua's soul. "Granny, this giant is really more powerful than before." Xiaohua's soul not only had the secret technique of soul cultivation, but also a soul armor obtained from a sword cultivator. Although the quality was not high, it was better than nothing. The entire dark cloud shook slightly and became extremely stable again. Dang! The mace and the wishful staff collided. A wave of air that was even larger than the explosion of the fire talisman was produced from the two people, rushing rapidly in all directions. Even the giant's body that was bigger than a stalactite staggered with the impact. The mace in his hand was lifted high, almost falling out of his hand. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure also rushed out with the wave of air, but Xiaohua's figure was like a swimming fish, drifting slightly in the wave of air. It was a very clever reason for the wave of air to be like a horsetail whisk, rushing towards the giant while shouting, "Fight!" The giant was stunned. The slight numbness in his arm dissipated, and he had to wave his mace again. At this time, before Xiaohua's wishful staff hit, Xiao Mao's Qinkuan ring and Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip also broke through the wave of air and flew in front of the giant. Xiao Mao's Qinkuan ring aside, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip was famous among the cultivators. It was unknown how much swordsman's blood had been spilled on it. However, the giant didn't care about this famous magic treasure at all. The giant didn't even try to dodge the whip that was like a golden dragon. However, when the whip hit, the giant's shoulders shook as if he was trying to reduce the power of the immortal piercing whip. Perhaps it was some kind of secret technique. In short, a faint yellow light flashed on the giant's shoulder and caught the immortal piercing whip. Moreover, the force of the rebound surged and the immortal piercing whip shook slightly in the air. -9. Chapter 25-21. Li Zongbao was dumbfounded. He knew that although his magic power was exhausted, the Holy Whip was a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. How could it be so weak? Looking at Xiao Mao's Heaven and Earth Ring, it was even weaker. It also hit the giant's back, but the giant didn't even bother to shake it. The Heaven and Earth Ring was like a tickle to the giant. He slid on the giant's shiny back and flew up into the air again. Just as Li Zongbao was dumbfounded, he felt a moment of trance. Then, a chill came from his heart, and an irresistible tyranny came out from the chill. Attack! Almost at the same time as Xiaohua, Li Zongbao flew up and grabbed the immortal piercing whip with one hand. At the same time, his other hand took out a pill and swallowed it. A hot aura came from his meridians. The immortal piercing whip let out a roar like a dragon. As Li Zongbao waved it, the runes on the immortal piercing whip began to move. It broke free from the immortal piercing whip's shackles and turned into a golden torrent. It rushed into the air and rushed towards the yellow giant's back. Dang! There was another sound. Unsurprisingly, Xiaohua's body flew up again, and at the same time, the giant's body was hit by the wishful staff and took 2 steps back. At the same time, the golden light of the Holy Whip broke through the airwaves from the 2 weapons and hit the giant's back. Oomph! The giant let out a deep sound from its nose. Its back shook slightly, and another wave of yellow light flashed. Bang! The golden light of the Holy Whip scattered the light, but the golden light of the Holy Whip was also annihilated. Looking at the back of the giant, there was a faint trace of blood slowly appearing. Old man, eat my whip again. Seeing that the Holy Whip didn't work, Li Zongbao's body glowed again, and he was about to activate his magic power again. Seniorly, use the secret method to help me. Xiaohua saw the coldness in Li Zongbao's eyes and hurriedly shouted. At this time, Xia Hui had enough strength to deal with the giant wolf alone. He always paid attention to the movements of Li Zongbao and the others. Seeing that Li Zongbao was about to fight, he hurriedly shouted, Li Zongbao, calm your mind. It seemed to be a secret technique of the Utopia faction. Xiaohua didn't feel anything when he heard the voice, but it was like a thunderclap in Li Zongbao's ears. Li Zongbao was shocked, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Then, he waved his hand and took back the celestial piercing whip. Senior Marshal Brotherly, quickly use your secret technique to help me. Xiaohua shouted hysterically, this old man is too powerful. All right. Li Zongbao silently waved the piercing fairy whip. At this time, the brilliance of the piercing fairy whip was not as arrogant as before. Instead, it was as light as the wind. At the same time, Li Zongbao waved his left arm. Xiaohua's figure soared into the sky, and the staff in his hand smashed down. Old man, eat my staff. Woo! The staff carried a strong wind and smashed down like a mountain. Ding ding dang dang, there was a burst of chaotic sounds. Xiaohua's heavenly staff technique was unleashed. He was like a fish in water under the wolf-tooth staff. On one hand, he used the heavy wolf-tooth staff to hit the giant. On the other hand, he could use the power of the wolf-tooth staff to counterattack the giant. Although the giant's technique of using the wolf-tooth staff was perfect, and even the control of the power of his arms was unparalleled in the Dawn Rain continent, he encountered Xiaohua, a cultivator who was the nemesis of giants. What was the result? In just half a meal's time, the giant's bones were soft and his muscles were numb. The yellow brilliance of his body gradually flashed frequently. Hee hee. This giant with illusory sword cultivation is nothing more than this. Xiao Hua sneered. He suddenly raised the wolf-toothed staff and shouted, "Eat my staff again! Xiao, you are." When he heard that Xiao Hua's surname was Xiao, the giant's face changed greatly. It seemed that the matter that had been uncertain for a long time finally had an answer. He waved the wolf-toothed staff and dragged it backward. He no longer paid attention to the crowd. He spread his feet and fled into the depths of the karst cave. The twisting buttocks and the fear of turning back in panic were not much different from the previous giants who were scared away by Xiao Hua. Seeing that the giant had escaped, Li Zongbao was about to urge Xiao Hua to chase after him, but Xiao Hua trembled slightly in midair. His arms hung down weakly, and he sat cross-legged in midair. Obviously, he was exhausted. Sigh, forget it. Li Zongbao knew that Xiao Hua was exhausted again. He sighed and looked at Xie Hui. Without the threat of the giant, Xie Hui was able to deal with the beast cultivator with the giant wolf easily. However, at the same time, the weakness of a Dao cultivator's weak body was exposed. Although he urged his magic power and used the power of magic to block the demonic weapon, his forehead was still sweating. He was even more limp and numb than Xiao Hua. Even when he was flying, he was still panting. Looking at the giant wolf, although it was moving slower, its momentum was still as strong as a rainbow. Every time it attacked, it would try to get close to Xie Hui. Needless to say, how could Xie Hui dare to let the giant wolf get close to him? He used his horsetail whisk and magic arts from time to block the demonic weapon, the Sky Piercer halberd. At the same time, he also used the confinement technique and the fireball technique. However, the giant wolf seemed to be guarding against Xiao Hua. It didn't dare to get too close to him. It only destroyed Xie Hui's magic arts and slowly approached him. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xie Hui sighed and looked at Li Zongbao and the others. His body floated up and flew towards the karst cave opposite of Li Zongbao. At the same time, he took out an elixir and swallowed it. Roar! When the giant wolf saw that Xie Hui was actually escaping, it couldn't help but roar. The Sky Piercer suddenly left its hand and stabbed towards Xie Hui's back. The sharp sound of the wind made it impossible for Xie Hui to not turn around to face the enemy. It was also at this moment that the giant wolf tilted its head and spat out two huge wind blades from its mouth. It charged aggressively towards Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. This guy actually didn't dare to provoke Xiao Hua, who had his eyes closed. However, it wanted to target Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. The wind blades stirred the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the air and became bigger and bigger. The sharp wind blades cut through the air and made a strange sound. It sounded like the sobbing of an abandoned woman or the sobbing of the night rain. "You're courting death." Xiao Hua, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. He waved his hand and seemed to be forming some kind of seal. Along with a wave of spiritual energy, a stream of primordial water sprayed out from the top of Xiao Hua's head like a fountain. The moment the primordial water appeared, it immediately turned into turbulent waves and quickly covered the entire karst cave. Splash! The clear sound of water splashing could be heard. It was as if a small fish had jumped out of the water and was wagging its tail happily. A wave of water splashed out from the surging waves, blocking between the wind blade and Li Zongbao. The extremely sharp wind blade seemed to be able to cut through the void. However, when the wind blade silently entered the innate primordial water, not even a drop of innate primordial water appeared. Not even a bubble could be formed, and it immediately disappeared without a trace. The giant wolf originally didn't care. Although Xiao Hua's primordial water quickly blocked the space, he only thought that it was because of the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, when the wind blades silently disappeared, his face slightly changed and he hurriedly swept out with his spiritual sense. However, when his spiritual sense came into contact with the primordial water, he immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and shouted in shock, "This is primordial water?" However, even though he reacted quickly, a trace of his spiritual sense was still swallowed by the primordial water. How is this possible? The giant wolf's eyes turned and looked at the seemingly endless primordial water gushing out and covering the surrounding space. Even where his eyes could see, there were faint illusions in every drop of primordial water. He couldn't help but groan. That's right, other people would only have a few drops of primordial water, or even one drop. However, they would use the primordial water to stimulate the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth. How could they be as extravagant as Xiaohua? Every drop of primordial water was the real primordial water? Looking at Xia, he quickly waved his horsetail whisk and forcefully blocked the giant wolf's sky piercer. Then, he saw an azure brilliance like the Milky Way hanging upside down in front of him. He was immediately shocked, but he was also lucky. He knew that this was definitely not the doing of the giant wolf. He hurriedly turned to look at Xiaohua and the others. When he heard the giant wolf scream, he hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and didn't even look at the primordial water. This primordial water was even more useful to cultivators. In a situation where he didn't have any defensive measures, he definitely wouldn't provoke this primordial water. Since you didn't even leave when I asked you to, then don't leave. Xiaohua sneered. The hidden Buddha Saraira waved a Buddha seal and the surging primordial water suddenly boiled, shooting out giant wolves from everywhere. Ha ha ha, it's just primordial water. Why should I be afraid? The giant wolf's heroic spirit soared to the sky. He waved his sky piercer, and like Xiaohua's wishful staff, it formed a temporary safe space around him, blocking all the splashing primordial water outside. Oomph! Xiaohua didn't refute at all. He gradually urged the primordial water to separate the giant wolf and Xia, while he and Li Zongbao were separated in another place. Li Zongbao frowned, but since the entire primordial water was controlled by Xiaohua, it didn't matter where Xiaohua was. Sure enough, Xia stood in midair for a moment and understood Xiaohua's intention. After a short rest, he urged his spiritual power and threw the horsetail whisk in his hand. The horsetail whisk turned into a comet and shot towards the giant wolf. Dang! The horsetail whisk collided with the halberd. Although the horsetail whisk looked very light, it contained the spiritual power of Chu Hui, an early gold core stage cultivator. Once it collided with the halberd, it immediately emitted a strong brilliance, causing the halberd to stagnate for a moment. There were only a few strands, and each strand had rushed into the weak spot. Huh! The giant wolf roared and waved the sky piercer, cutting off the threads of the primordial water. However, at the moment when it was cut, a few drops still fell into the defense of the sky piercer. -9. Chapter 25-22. The giant wolf hastily moved his body. However, Chu Hui's horsetail whisk came again. The giant wolf had no choice but to wave his Fangtian halberd again. Just as he was distracted, the drop of innate primordial water landed on his feet. A series of sizzling sounds rang out, and black light and light smoke appeared on the giant wolf's feet. However, this light smoke was unable to withstand the Xiantian true water and was instantly corroded. After a short while, the light and smoke finally disappeared, and the giant wolf's eyes flashed with shock and pain. Then, the giant wolf looked around and felt regretful. If it wasn't for the killing intent in his heart, he would have escaped from this karst cave a long time ago. At this moment, the innate primordial water had trapped him, and the young man who controlled the water was on the other side. Even if he wanted to kill the young man, it would be impossible. Just now, he was thinking about how to kill Chu Hui. Now, he was thinking about how to escape. The giant wolf was a beast cultivator. However, he didn't have Li Chengshu's protective talisman, and he didn't have the hands of a nascent soul realm cultivator. Facing Chu Hui's attack and Xiaohua's innate primordial water, he was helpless. After Chu Hui disturbed him a few more times, and a few drops of innate primordial water corroded his body, the giant wolf's eyes flashed with desperation. Woo! The giant wolf raised his head and howled. His body started to emit a black brilliance and light smoke. When the brilliance covered him, a giant wolf shape appeared in mid-air. Before the innate primordial water landed, the giant wolf opened his mouth and spat out a black pearl the size of a thumb. As soon as the pearl appeared, it stirred up a huge gust of wind. However, the gust of wind only raged within the innate primordial water. Once it touched the innate primordial water, it turned invisible. The gust of wind stirred around the giant wolf shape and supported the innate primordial water. Although the innate primordial water was slowly pressing down, it was able to maintain the giant wolf shape and prevent it from being corroded. Oh! Although Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, he wasn't too surprised. He still formed a Buddhist seal and urged the innate primordial water to attack the giant wolf's gust of wind. As for Xiehui, he looked a little embarrassed. However, he also used his horsetail whisk to hit the wind again and again. Boom! Under the joint attack of the two, the giant wolf could no longer endure it. Its slight hesitation was also shattered. The thumb-sized pearl suddenly exploded, and an awe-like hurricane was formed from the pearl, piercing straight into the primordial water. Oh! This time, Xiaohua was truly astonished. That hurricane seemed to have materialized. It was sharp and extremely fast, piercing through the innate true water that he had set up. Moreover, the tail of the hurricane, where it was rotating, was also rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded into a hurricane passage that was several feet wide. Roar! The giant wolf let out a low roar, and its body flashed with light. At the same time, it rapidly shrank and rushed into the hurricane passage. Xiaohua hurriedly activated his true water and tried his best to shatter the passageway. However, this hurricane passage was abnormally tough. Although Xiaohua had shrunk the passage by a bit, it was still impossible to shatter it. Damn it! At this time, Xiaohua was also regretting. He had placed the giant wolf and Xiehui together while he hid in another place. The path that the giant wolf rushed out of was in the opposite direction of him. If he was close, he could have used the wishful staff to kill the giant wolf. Unfortunately, he was not close. Open, Xiaohua shouted. He saw that the innate primordial water near Xiehui had a crack that led to the outside of the karst cave. Xiehui really wanted to use his horsetail whisk to hit the giant wolf's tail. When he saw that, he immediately activated his magical treasure and rushed out of the innate primordial water. He rushed in the direction that the giant wolf had flown out of the innate primordial water. He wanted to stop the giant wolf before it rushed out of the innate primordial water. However, he was still too slow. When he caught up with it, the giant wolf had already rushed out of the innate primordial water and rushed into one of the karst caves. Xiehui did not hesitate. He did not even turn his head and chased after it. Looking at his speed, he was still faster than the giant wolf that had lost its inner core. If there were no accidents, killing the giant wolf would not be a problem. Seeing that Xiehui had chased after the giant wolf, Xiaohua waved his hand and activated a spell. The innate primordial water was slowly sucked into the innate primordial water. Big brother, Xiaomao saw that the azure innate primordial water was slowly decreasing. He quickly said in a low voice, "What is it?" Xiaohua replied, Is this really innate primordial water?" Xiaomao hesitated. "Why? Is it useful to you?" Xiaohua did not answer and asked directly. Yes. Xiaomao said honestly. Little brother has a water attribute body. Master has a magical power that can only be cultivated by absorbing innate primordial water. Little brother has been looking for the whereabouts of this innate primordial water. I did not expect. Xiaohua nodded. How much do you need? 749 drops, Xiaomao replied in a low voice. After all, this was a huge number. His master said that he only needed 7 drops to learn the magical power. Xiaohua nodded. He knew clearly that most of the magical powers on the Xiaoyu continent had 6 as the limit. The water magical power taught by Xuanyin actually had 7 levels. It was obviously not bad. Where is your magical weapon? Xiaohua pointed with his finger. A thin stream of innate primordial water flew out and landed in front of Xiaomao. Here. Xiaomao was overjoyed. He quickly took out a square jade bottle. Xiaohua saw this and his expression did not change. The thin stream of innate primordial water slowly fell into the jade bottle. After a while, the thin stream of innate primordial water stopped. Xiaohua said, This is 98 drops. Take it back and give it to your master. Yes, thank you, big brother. Xiao Mao's face was filled with ecstasy. He quickly took out a strange yellow talisman and pasted it on the jade bottle. A yellow light flashed and the jade bottle returned to its normal appearance. Xiao Mao carefully kept it in his storage pouch. Big brotherly, do you want it? Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao with a smile. I don't have it. Li Zongbao swung the immortal piercing whip in his hand. Golden light shot out in all directions. I only need this immortal piercing whip. Sigh, Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. He kept all the innate primordial water into the clear water bottle. Xiao Hua. Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua and suddenly said, I'm afraid you have too many tricks up your sleeve. You must not have too many tricks up your sleeve. Thank you, big brotherly. Xiao Hua bowed and said, I know what I'm doing. Although Li Zongbao said he shook his head slightly and said, I have to reconsider your words. Ha ha ha, big brotherly, do whatever you want. Xiao Hua laughed and said. Then, he looked at the direction Xia Hui went and asked, Do we still need to chase after him? No need. Li Zongbao said indifferently. That beast cultivator spat out his inner core and exploded it. What other tricks can he have? If martial Uncle Xia, we can't even deal with this. As he was speaking, he saw a divine perception sweep over from afar. It was Xia Hui who flew over excitedly. Greetings, martial Uncle Xia Hui. Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to be slow and hurriedly bowed. Get up. Xia Hui waved his hand. He didn't have the attitude of a senior and hurriedly returned the greeting. I still have to thank you today. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to kill Yang Qi. I would have been lucky if I could have escaped safely. I don't dare. Xiao Hua still had some impression of Xia Hui. He smiled apologetically and said, It's all martial uncle's credit. I don't dare to take credit for it. Hee, little friend Xiao, that day in Taiching Sex Hao realm, I already knew that you would have great achievements in the future. Today, I see that it's true. It's only been a few years. Not only have you reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, your methods are also very powerful. You scared the giant away with great strength and even used a rare method to force the wolf cultivator to explode his inner core. Even my Zongbao can't achieve this. When Xiao Hua heard this, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, Martial uncle is overpraising me. It's all thanks to martial brother Li Zongbao. If he didn't have the secret technique, I wouldn't have been able to combine his and Xiao Mao's magic power. I wouldn't have been able to have such great strength. That was a giant with the strength of an illusory sword. I wouldn't have fought it head-on. When Xia Hui saw Li Zongbao's expression, he smiled and extended his hand. In his hand was a storage pouch. He passed it to Xiao Hua and said, This is Liang Qi's storage pouch. It should belong to little friend Xiao. No need. Xiao Hua looked around at the supreme grade spirit stones and said with a smile, It's great that I have this. Haha. Xia Hui passed the storage pouch to Xiao Hua and said, Take a look at it first. Oh, Xiao Hua was stunned. He took the storage pouch and scanned it with his divine thought. He smiled and said, So this giant wolf didn't fight for nothing. The spirit stones inside should have been collected in the flowing ice valley. You can take it. Xia Hui waved his hand and said, If I take it, I will feel uneasy. How about this? Xiao Hua waved his hand and took half of the water-type spirit stones and the sky piercer. He smiled and said, The demonic weapon is useless to Martial Uncle, so I'll take it. The rest are Martial Uncle's. If Martial Uncle didn't fight with this wolf cultivator, I wouldn't have been able to kill him. All right. Xia Hui didn't decline anymore. He took the storage pouch and looked at Li Zongbao worriedly. He said in a low voice, Zongbao, success depends on the celestial piercing whip. Failure depends on the celestial piercing whip. This celestial piercing whip is a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. Your cultivation level hasn't reached that level yet. Don't use it by force. If the celestial piercing whip backfires, you will have a hard time. Yes, I understand. Li Zongbao bowed and said, Master has already given me the secret technique. It should be able to restrain the celestial piercing whip's backfire. Sigh, that senior brother Hung Feng of mine. Sometimes, He is too headstrong and cares about his face too much. Xia Hui sighed and said, You have to know that those who are too headstrong break easily, while those who are soft will never be defeated. Sometimes, you can't be too headstrong. Li Zongbao was silent. He didn't reply like before. All right, Chu Hui shook his head slightly. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He tilted his head slightly as if he was listening to something. Immediately after, joy appeared on his face, and he hurriedly said, Cool Breeze Valley's Su Bo actually killed Black Phoenix Sword Sect's LV Jing. Right now, he's teaming up with Changbai Sect's Li Feiyu to hunt down Void Heaven Sword Sect's Qin Mu Ming. This old man chased away that unknown giant and killed Gorilla Mountain's Liang Qi. Once this old man and the two Dao friends kill Qin Mu Ming, our Dao Sect's Flowing Ice Valley battle will be a great victory. That's right. What about the battle between the Foundation Establishment cultivators? -9. Chapter 25-23. Only then did Chu Hui remember those Foundation Establishment disciples. All right, Senior Uncle knows. We will also win. Li Zongbao replied without hesitation. Great. Chu Hui clapped his hands and said, You all can return for now. After we kill Qin Mu, I will send you a message. With that, Chu Hui's face was filled with joy. He executed his flying technique and flew in one direction. Let's go. Li Zongbao took a look and flew back to the karst cave. Tisk. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and smiled apologetically. Senior Brotherly, there are so many supreme-grade spirit stones here. Don't you? Hee, you can harvest as much as you want. Li Zongbao raised his eyebrows and stood in midair. I will wait for you here. All right. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Xiao Mao, go. Yes. Xiao Mao heard and quickly flew to the front of the stone wall. However, no matter how fast he was not as fast as Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had already taken out his wishful staff and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. Xiao Mao knew that time was tight and did not dare to delay. He also took out his universe ring and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. However, when he had just harvested 2 spirit stones, he realized that something was wrong. It turned out that other than the spirit stones on the surface, there was nothing deeper. Even when he smashed a few feet with his universe ring, it was still empty. This? Xiao Mao hurriedly raised his head. Just as he was about to shout, he saw Xiao Hua's gloomy face. Xiao Hua had excavated the jade essence in Spring Gold Mountain. He had just harvested a piece and realized that something was wrong. He had also smashed a deep hole. The spirit stone veins in Flowing Ice Valley have long been excavated. There are only a few pieces left. That's why Sky Patrol City reported this place to the meeting hall like 7 Extremes Mountain and Spring Gold Mountain. Li Zongbao said calmly, Before we came, Master had already explained the pros and cons. This place is just to kill. Yes, to test the strength of the swordsmen in Flowing Ice Valley. It would be best if we could kill all of them. As for the spirit stones, this is an abandoned vein. Even if Junior Brother harvested all the spirit stones here, I'm afraid it would not be comparable to the spirit stones in the storage bag. Although a fly is small, it's still meat. Xiao Hua looked at the sparkling spirit stone with reluctance and said with a groan, A fly is meat, but if there is a big piece of fat meat outside, this fly can't be considered as fat meat. Li Zongbao said coldly, That's right. Xiao Hua slaps his forehead. Those sword cultivators' storage pouches definitely have more spirit stones than the ones here. Quick, Xiao Mao, let's chase after him. AI, Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua excitedly flying around and couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Although spirit stones weren't bad, to treat spirit stones so seriously, it really didn't match Xiao Hua's cultivation. Then, Li Zongbao was a little envious. It seemed that having such a hobby was better than having no hobby at all. Okay. However, this thought only flashed in his mind for a moment before it was immediately killed. The Parting Feelings treasure mirror really needed to be Parting Feelings. These rather mundane hobbies had long been cleaned up by Li Zongbao. Xiao Hua excitedly rushed out of the karst cave, but immediately stopped at the entrance with a bitter expression. Not to mention finding those cultivators who were chasing after the swordsman. Xiao Hua didn't even have a clue how to return to the karst cave from before. In front of him, the tangled and complicated karst cave that was like a spider web was simply 100 times, 1,000 times more ferocious than those giants and wolf cultivators. Senior Marshal Brother Li, please go first. Xiao Hua very politely stood in midair and raised his hand, inviting Li Zhongbao to go first. Oomph! The corners of Li Zhongbao's mouth faintly curled into a smile. Although he was extremely unwilling to secretly laugh in his heart, he still couldn't help but laugh. Which cultivator who could step into the Qi refinement realm wasn't an outstanding figure among the mundane world? Moreover, since they were able to cultivate into the foundation establishment realm, they were truly dragons and phoenixes among men. Their aptitude and insight made it difficult for others to catch up to them. Not to mention the ability to remember things with a single glance. This ability to recognize directions, even a slightly intelligent child could do it. However, Xiao Hua, who was able to easily kill a middle-stage core formation cultivator, was actually so weak in this aspect that it was hard to believe. Hee, this guy's divine sense is no small matter. If it wasn't for the fact that divine sense can't be used here, I'm afraid he would have already run away. A trace of emotion flashed in Li Zhongbao's eyes. After carefully identifying for a moment, he flew in a certain direction without hesitation. Xiao Mao, look at the direction Senior Marshal Brother Li is flying in. Is there anything special? Xiao Hua really couldn't see the difference between this karst cave and other karst caves, so he couldn't help but ask. Xiao Mao smiled and said, "This little brother also doesn't know. However, this little brother remembers the path we came from. Although this karst cave doesn't lead to the direction we came from, I feel that it should lead to the direction the swordsman fled in." Really? Xiao Hua looked at the endless stalactites in disbelief. No matter what, he couldn't see any difference. Damn it! This young master has the hand of karma. Xiao Hua was extremely indignant. This young master can even sense the karma of the world. There's no reason why this young master can't understand this, right? However, Xiao Hua, who could sense his own crisis, Cui Hongshan and Dui Qiming's crisis, and even Xiao Mao's crisis, couldn't make sense of these minor details. Sure enough, after flying for less than an hour, under Li Zhongbao's lead, sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes up, and sometimes down, there was a rumbling sound in their ears. Moreover, the rich water, element heaven earth Ling Qi in the karst cave also became more and more viscous, making people's skin feel moist. Hearing the sound, Xiao Hua really admired Li Zhongbao from the bottom of his heart. For him, this absolutely couldn't be so easy. It was like letting Li Zhongbao kill that wolf cultivator Liang Qi. Just as he was thinking, several third-grade swordsmen fled in panic from the front. "Where do you think you're going?" Seeing this, Li Zhongbao's figure floated up, and the immortal piercing whip in his hand was about to wave again. Unfortunately, when those swordsmen saw Xiao Hua and the others, they immediately turned pale with fright. Their figures turned, and they fled toward a fork in the karst cave, simply faster than a shooting star. Li Zhongbao's expression didn't change, as if sword cultivators should be like this when they see him. Just as he was about to chase after them, a dozen or so utmost happiness faction disciples rushed over from where the sword cultivators came from. When those disciples saw Li Zhongbao, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Most of them cupped their hands and chased after those sword cultivators. There were also 3 late-stage foundation establishment disciples who stayed behind. They stepped forward and greeted, "Senior Brother Li." "I don't dare." Li Zhongbao hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "I've only just reached the late stage of foundation establishment. How can I be addressed by 3 senior brothers like this?" Alas, if we're talking about age, we're naturally Senior Brother Li's senior brothers. However, even if we've already reached the late stage of foundation establishment, compared to Senior Brother Li's magical powers, we're really ashamed. If you don't deserve the title of senior brother, then we can only call you Marshal Uncle. The oldest-looking old man said very sincerely, "That's right." Another old man also stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Previously, we were still thinking that if it weren't for the help of Senior Brother Li and these 2 fellow cultivators, I'm afraid that over 10,000 of U.S. disciples would have been buried in this flowing ice valley one by one. Greetings to the two junior brothers Xiao. The third disciple stepped forward with a smile and said to Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao, "We disciples will always remember the help of the two fellow cultivators in our hearts. Hee, this is all senior brother Li's credit." Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hands. With his special permission from the conference hall, I was able to get together with junior brother Xiao Mao. Even coming to Flowing Ice Valley was under senior brother Li's command. We dare not claim credit. This disciple was a disciple of the Utopia faction. When he saw that Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect and Xiao Mao of the Shuanyan Order were so humble and did not compete with Li Zongbao for credit, he was even more delighted. No matter how he looked at them, they were pleasing to the eye. You two fellow cultivators don't need to be humble. The joint attack of the two of you and senior brother Li was not only seen by the disciples of the Utopia faction, but also by the disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley. If there's a contribution from the disciples of the Utopia faction, then there's definitely a contribution from the Imperial Thunder Sect and the Shuanyan Order. When we return to the Sky Patrol City, we'll definitely report the truth. This great contribution will definitely belong to the three of you. Xiao Mao was overjoyed and bowed. Senior brother, you're praising us too much. As they spoke, Li Zongbao had more or less understood the situation of the battle. Just as he thought, the sword cultivators were defeated like a landslide. Under the pursuit of the Taoist sect cultivators, they could only rely on their familiarity with the terrain of Flowing Ice Valley to escape the fate of total annihilation. But even so, when Xiao Hua chased the giant away, Chu Hui killed Liang Qi and found this place. Nearly 30% of the sword cultivators were killed. 30% of the sword cultivators, that was close to 4,000 people. It was inevitable that the elder of the Utopia faction was excited. Hee, not bad. Li Zongbao smiled and nodded. Junior brothers, you've worked hard. I just came over from Uncle Chu Hui's place. Uncle Chu Hui fought against the giant and the wolf cultivator alone. Just when we lured the giant away, Uncle Chu Hui unleashed his invincible power and killed the wolf cultivator Liang Qi. In addition, when the giant saw that things were not going well, he was so scared that he fled in panic. Great! When the three disciples heard this, their faces lit up with joy. At this time, several disciples in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage flew over. They were the disciples of the Taibai faction in the Cool Breeze Valley. When they met, they exchanged pleasantries and expressed their gratitude. However, it was obvious that after the disciples of the two factions greeted Li Zongbao, they were more affectionate with Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. They even in their words, they gave the credit to Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. Haha. Xiao Hua was secretly happy. He knew that the two factions didn't want the Utopia faction to take all the credit. However, he just smiled and pushed Xiao Mao forward. Although Xiao Mao's reputation was not as good as Li Zongbao's, he was also smooth in dealing with people, almost similar to Cui Hongshan. In just a moment, he had gradually become the focus of everyone's attention. Oh! At this time, Li Zongbao suddenly raised his hand and said, "Fellow cultivators, please be quiet." -9. Chapter 25-24. When everyone heard this, they immediately shut their mouths. Li Zongbao suddenly flew several feet to the side. He clapped his hands and took out a strange-looking jade pendant. Under the influence of his magic power, the jade pendant turned into a stream of light and rushed out. Martial Uncle Chu Hui seems to have sent a message, but because this place is too far away. Xiao Mao explained. Sure enough, in less than half a cup of tea's time, two streams of light flew back from afar and landed in Li Zongbao's hands. When Li Zongbao's spiritual sense entered the flying message talisman, he suddenly understood. He raised his head and looked at the eager crowd. He smiled and said, "The battle of Flowing Ice Valley has ended. Martial Uncle Chu Hui, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu of Changbai Sect, and Martial Uncle Subo of Cool Breeze Valley joined forces and killed Qin Mu Ming of Void Heaven Sword School. However, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu was killed by Qin Mu Ming's last attack." When everyone heard the first half of the sentence, they were about to cheer. However, the last sentence destroyed their excited expressions. Everyone from Changbai's sect showed anger on their faces. Let's go. We'll kill the remaining sword cultivators and avenge Marshal Uncle Li. Okay. All the disciples of Changbai's sect agreed in unison and sent out requests to the disciples of Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley. Let's go. Kill the sword cultivators. The disciples of Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley were duty-bound. However, at this moment, a faint rumbling sound came from afar. At first, it was extremely soft, like the sound of thunder in the sky, but this sound was continuous, one sound after another, coming closer and closer from afar. What was special was that the vibration spread very quickly. It had long been affected by the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The rich water spiritual energy trembled rapidly. As the sound approached, it almost exploded. This is bad. Others might not know the depth of the sound, but Xiao Hua came out from the spiritual stone vein of Spring Gold Mountain. His first reaction was that someone had activated the defensive array of the spiritual stone vein of Flowing Ice Valley. Spring Gold Mountain. Xiao Hua's expression changed greatly. He gritted his teeth and shouted these 3 words. Xiao Hua didn't need to explain too much. Everyone's face turned ashen. Everyone present, who didn't know about the tens of thousands of sword cultivators that died at Spring Gold Mountain? Quick! Everyone no longer talked about taking revenge for Li Feiyu. They all ran towards the place they thought was the safest. Don't rush. Li Zongbao climbed up and shouted, "Panic is the most important thing right now. If you trust me, the 3 of you will follow behind us." After saying that, he didn't care about what the others thought and took the lead to rush out. The bystanders were in a state of panic. While they were deciding between themselves and Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua did not hesitate to follow Li Zongbao. Since Xiao Hua had left, even if Xiao Mao didn't trust Li Zongbao, he trusted Xiao Hua. Naturally, he would fly away. The battle between the 3 of them was so eye-catching that it left a deep impression on the onlookers. Seeing that the 3 of them didn't panic and rushed into a karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction also followed them. Then, no one left. The disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley also followed them closely. Everyone tried their best to activate their true core strength. Their magic power was completely spent on the flying technique. They wanted to leave this underground mine as soon as possible. However, although they were flying extremely fast, the sound of the explosion was even faster. It was just like Xiao Hua's thunder riding technique in the sky earlier. The crackling sound and the rumbling sound of the earth shaking and mountains shaking quickly caught up to them, seeing a huge impact catching up to them from behind. Even though they had already expected it and had already activated their protective spells to resist, there was a loud whoop sound. The impact threw everyone high up into the cave. The true essence in everyone's meridians suddenly condensed for a moment, and they couldn't mobilize the slightest bit of magic power. Fortunately, it was only for a moment. The true core strength could flow smoothly again. Everyone struggled to stand in midair. Even Xiao Hua was astonished. The impact was really too big. Even with his cultivation, he was also struggling to resist it. Just as they were struggling to stand, a violent rumbling sound came from all around them. It was as if a pair of big hands were shaking the 1,000-kilometer flowing ice valley. Xiao Hua and the others, who had just stabilized their bodies, were once again affected by the violent tremors. One by one, they fell to the ground in a sorry state. Fortunately, although these cultivators' bodies hadn't been specially tempered, they were still much stronger than ordinary people. They didn't have to worry about being injured. Pa, 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 pa. A series of explosions sounded in the air, following the violent tremors. However, the tremors were really strong, making it easy for everyone to ignore them. Xiao Hua also fell to the ground. A light blue brilliance just happened to flash above his head. The pa sound was like a bolt of lightning piercing through the air. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and saw it. He was very shocked and whispered in a low voice. Li Zongbao was right next to Xiao Hua. His eyes also lit up. He immediately raised his head and looked left and right. He saw that the pa sound was continuous. At the same time, the violent tremors continued forward. Even in the rock wall 100 feet away, The light blue brilliance and the pa sound were also produced in the rock wall. What puzzled everyone was that after the frightening tremors and the impact that pushed all the cultivators down from the sky, it was as if nothing had happened. Everything returned to normal. If it weren't for the rumbling sounds in the distance and the fact that everyone fell to the ground in a sorry state, everyone would think that it was just a dream. What's going on? Xiaohua scratched his head. He didn't believe that such a huge thing would have no effect. It was actually not a plot against the cultivators. Senior Li, Xiao Mao was also surprised. He crawled up from the ground and whispered, "Was the movement just now Flowing Ice Valley's forbidden technique?" Li Zongbao shook his head slightly and said, "This Flowing Ice Valley has been in the hands of the enemy for many years. Even if there was a forbidden technique, it would have been destroyed by the swordsman long ago. So, this forbidden technique must be targeted at the cultivators of our Dao sect?" Xiao Mao's eyebrows knitted together. "It should be, right?" Li Zongbao activated his true core strength. When the true core strength circulated in his meridians, he didn't see any abnormalities. This was indeed abnormal, so he couldn't help but answer with some hesitation. "Oh no!" Xiaohua suddenly shouted. "What's wrong?" "Junior Li, what did you think of?" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao asked hurriedly. Xiaohua's expression changed. "The guarding disciples of this Flowing Ice Valley are from the Void Heaven Sword faction and the Black Phoenix Sword faction. Isn't Qin Jian from the Void Heaven Sword faction? Qin Mu Ming, who was just killed by Martial Uncle Chu Hui, should be Qin Jian's blood relative, right?" Xiao Hua explained. "Yes, so what?" Li Zongbao still didn't understand. The other disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction also gathered around. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. That day, Tu Hong from the Sky Patrol City killed tens of thousands of people at Golden Spring Mountain. His reputation spread, and he became the #1 hero of our Dao sect. He suppressed Qin Jian's fame. Senior Li, think about it. How could Qin Jian, who cherishes his reputation, let go of such an excellent opportunity? Since he could break into our Sky Patrol City and kill Tu Hong, I'm afraid he could turn this Flowing Ice Valley into the second Golden Spring Mountain. Killing tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators should be his goal in this battle, right? Hiss. Li Zongbao hadn't experienced Golden Spring Mountain, so he definitely didn't think as deeply as Xiao Hua. After hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately gasped. That's right. This Flowing Ice Valley has been in Qin Jian's hands for many years. He had already arranged everything. He was just waiting for the cultivators of our Dao sect to come and snatch it. As long as they snatched it, he could take advantage of the situation and kill the cultivators of our Dao sect and those swordsmen in the underground of the Flowing Ice Valley. In this way, not only could he kill Tu Hong, but he would also have more achievements than Tu Hong. Wouldn't he be more famous than before? But, Big Brother, Senior Li, Xiao Mao said in a low voice, we didn't do anything wrong. This guy must be guarding the exit. Li Zongbao's expression changed drastically. I'm afraid he destroyed all the karst caves just now and wanted to bury us here alive. Quick! The disciples of the Utopia faction heard this and became anxious. Let's quickly find the exit. Even if we have to risk our lives, we must rush out. Let's go. The disciples of the Changbai sect hurriedly activated their flying spell and rushed in the direction that Li Zongbao had flown to. Li Zongbao only hesitated for a moment before he hurriedly waved his hand and said, no matter what, let's find the exit first. Yes. Xiao Hua nodded, but he felt a little relieved. Others might not have the 5 elements escape spell or the ground escape spell, but he was not afraid. Even if there was a restrictive spell, he could use the rabbit's spiritual talisman to break it. Even if this place was deep underground in the Flowing Ice Valley, he could still escape underground. At most, he would knock Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao out. Everyone flew in a panic for a moment, and there were even more cultivators who were like headless flies scurrying around. When they saw Li Zongbao and the others, they were immediately overjoyed and flew up together with them. As the number of people gradually increased, everyone calmed down. It seemed that the situation was not as bad as they had imagined. The karst cave did not seem to have any changes, let alone collapse. However, just when everyone had calmed down, Someone suddenly said in surprise, Not, not good. I's true core strength is about to be used up. Haha, you're just a foundation establishment stage cultivator. A cultivator from the Cool Breeze Valley laughed. He was about to mock I, but when he said that, he turned pale with fright and said, Not good as expected. My true core strength is also rapidly depleting. Stop quickly. Li Zongbao checked a little, and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly shouted. As Li Zongbao stopped in mid-air, the crowd of about hundreds of people also stopped in mid-air. It's not working, Senior Li, Xiao Mao said bitterly. Even if we stop in mid-air, our true core strength is still depleting. -9.